Introduction to Stories from Wagner. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by David Wales. Stories from Wagner by J. Walker McSpadden. Introduction. It would be a longer story than all the stories from Wagner put together to tell where these tales began and how they grew. Centuries before they were set to music in the soul of Richard Wagner, some of them had been chanted around rude campfires by savage-looking men clad in the skins of animals. They were repeated by word of mouth long before even the rudest art of writing was learned. And in various lands they were known, though the stories often differed. For in those days men believed in spirits, good and bad, and in giants, dwarfs, gods, and goddesses. They told these stories to their children, just as real history is taught today, and later the legends were treasured not only for their deep interest, but also because they showed how people lived and thought long ago, while the world was in the making. When Wagner, the great music dramatist of Germany, was writing his wonderful operas, he found much of this rich material lying ready at his hand. Other parts he adapted to suit his needs, and it is the form in which he used the tales that has been followed in the simple retelling in the present volume, hence the justice of the title, Stories from Wagner. Let us pause a moment to see who this author was, and how he came to collect his themes. Richard Wagner's career extended over the better part of the last century. He was born in Leipzig, May 22, 1813. He died at Venice, February 13, 1883. His whole life was a struggle, for his musical ideas were unlike any that had gone before. But he lived to witness a splendid triumph, and today his operas are produced more often than those of any other composer. The following is the order in which the operas were first given: Rienzi, 1842, The Flying Dutchman, 1843, Tannhäuser, 1845, Lohengrin, 1850, Tristan und Isolde, 1865, The Master Singers, 1868, The Ring of the Nibelung, 1878, Parsifal, 1882. When Wagner was just beginning his career, he was in great doubt as to the choice of subjects for his operas. His first famous work, Rienzi, was based upon Italian history. The English novelist Bulwer Lytton has written a noted novel using the same title and groundwork. The legend of the Flying Dutchman, which Wagner next chose, is one of the best-known sea myths in existence. In every country sailors tell of a mysterious ship that is seen in times of danger or distress. The captain of this vessel bears many names, but it is believed that the varying tales are only versions of one original legend. The German poet Heine wrote one version, and from this Wagner obtained the first idea for his opera. With Tannhäuser, Wagner entered upon the purely German themes which he was thenceforth to find so rich a mine. This story, like many others, was extremely old, yet it had been treated only rarely. Ludwig Tieck had written some verses upon it, and from these Wagner got his idea. Owen Meredith, the English poet, has also given us a charming version entitled The Battle of the Bards. While Tannhäuser himself has been seldom written about, Walter von der Vogelweide, the Minnesinger and friend of Tannhäuser in the opera, is the subject of many poems, one of the last being by Longfellow. Sir Walter is set down in German history as an actual person, and many things are told about his marvelous gift of song. Wolfram von Eschenbach, another historic character found in the operas, once wrote a famous old poem entitled Parzival. Here Wagner discovered the germ of his beautiful story of Lohengrin, following the lines of an old and well-nigh forgotten legend. The opera of Parsifal, though not completed till more than 30 years later, was also conceived at this time, and remained a cherished project. Legends of the Holy Grail, with which it deals, are familiar in every Christian country. There is much in the characters of both Parsifal and Lohengrin to remind us of Tennyson's Sir Galahad in Idylls of the King, which treats of the Holy Grail. In Tristan and Isolde we have another legend which was well known during the Middle Ages. It was known in Wales, Ireland, Brittany, and Germany, where it was a frequent theme with many singers or wandering minstrels, like Walter von der Vogelweide. One of the earliest German authors to write down a version of it was a certain Gottfried of Strasbourg, and Wagner had at his command this and numerous other versions. English poets also have been greatly attracted by the tale. Sir Walter Scott, in Thomas the Rhymer, told the simplest version. Matthew Arnold, Tennyson, and Swinburne have given notable poems of some length on the subject. During the Middle Ages, and particularly in the 13th century, the city of Nuremberg was the seat of a famous musical guild or training school for poets and singers. In his Master Singers, Wagner has followed history for his scene, characters, and traditions, though he has made droll use of them. The Master Singers have left substantial proof that they really lived. There are poems still in existence signed by Sixtus Beckmesser, Veit Pogner, and others, while Hans Sachs has left whole volumes behind, and his memory is so revered that he is looked upon almost as the patron saint of his city. Longfellow says in his poem on Nuremberg, "Here Hans Sachs, the cobbler poet, laureate of the gentle craft, wisest of the 12 wise masters, in huge folios sang and laughed." Wagner also obtained his idea for the contest of song from one of Hoffmann's novels entitled Sängerkrieg. He made use of the same idea in Tannhäuser. Although The Ring of the Nibelung, Wagner's grand life work, was not presented until 1876, he had been at work upon its 4 parts for more than 25 years previously. He had published the first 2 parts without their musical score in 1853. The other operas which appeared in the meanwhile were but breathing spaces, so to speak, in the greater labour he had set himself to perform. Wagner was especially fortunate in his choice of subject. The Nibelungen myth was a great national epic, one of the oldest of the Teutonic race, dating back to the prehistoric era when Wotan, Fricka, Freya, Thor, Loki, and the other gods and goddesses were worshipped in the German forests. In the course of centuries, several versions of the legend appeared, some being found even in Iceland under the name of Eddas. In Germany a long epic poem came to be written by some unknown hand. It was called the Nibelungenlied, and it is the most famous of all early German poems. Of course, Wagner had access to all this material, but he made so many changes from it in writing his own poem as to create a new story. One which, independent of the wonderful music which he wrote to accompany it, gives him place among the foremost writers of his nation. Volumes have been written pointing out the differences between his Nibelungen story and the earlier legends. But the purpose of this little book is not to criticize, dissect, or compare. After giving these few needful names and dates, we wish merely to follow the splendid fancy of this singer of songs and teller of tales, wherever in the realm of storyland it may chance to lead us. One further word, however, of frank admission. While the spirit of the original is adhered to, and very often the exact words are quoted, it has not been deemed best to follow the argument too closely. Instead, simplicity and directness have been considered preferable to the involved plots and symbolical actions of the operas. The book is directed primarily to the needs of young people, and is sent out to them in the hope that sometime they may hear the dull booming of the Rhine about the gold, the magic fire as it sweeps to encircle the sleeping maiden, the forest voices which greet the young and fearless hero, the chorus of the pilgrims, and the song which won the bride for a prize. All these and many other good things are held in store by the future. Meanwhile, the story's the thing, and we who will never grow too old to believe in giants, dragons, and dwarfs, and the brave heroes who ride over the world doing heroic deeds, can still be thankful that Wagner lived and dreamed his dreams of the past. J. W. M. End of introduction. Part 1, Story 1 of Tales from Wagner by J. Walker McSpadden. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Part 1, The Ring of the Curse, Story 1, The Rheingold, Das Rheingold. Hundreds of years ago, in a wonderful time called the dawn of the world, there lived many strange beings which do not now exist. Gods and goddesses dwelt in the clouds that hovered above the mountain peaks. Great untamed giants roamed amid the valleys. Swarthy, misshapen dwarfs called Nibelungs toiled in the caves of the underworld, heaping up treasures of gold and silver which never did anyone any good. Ugly dragons crawled upon the earth, while beautiful water nymphs lived in the rivers and seas. Lastly, there were heroes and savage men who struggled together for the mastery in that far-off day when the world was in the making. How the end came to all these strange things, and how the reign of the gods finally ceased, will be set down in this fourfold story I am about to tell you. In the clear depths of the river Rhine in Germany once dwelt 3 water nymphs, lovely maidens who were very like other maidens, except that they passed their whole lives under the water and could not be seen by ordinary eyes. Fair were they in face and graceful in form. Their eyes beamed gladness, for they had never known sorrow, while their long golden hair floated about them like a garment, or tossed upon the wave-crest as they played some merry game of hide-and-seek amid the grottos of their watery world. They were called the Rhine daughters, and thus in frolicsome play did they spend their days, free from all care save one. It was this care and the sorrow following close upon it that caused the present story to be told. Upon one of the highest rocks, deep down in the bed of the Rhine, was stored a great lump of pure gold, brighter and more dazzling than any other treasure ever known. It was also more wonderful than any other gold, because it contained the power of making its owner master of all the world. This treasure had lain undisturbed in the river's bed for so long that it had come to be known as the Rheingold. It was watched over by the Rhine daughters, in whose care their father had left it. This was their sole duty, to keep guard night and day, lest some thief should come and steal the priceless treasure. One bright morning the maidens seemed unusually merry. They darted in and out the caverns with a speed which left the flying fish far behind. They laughed and chattered and sang, but glancing from time to time up at the precious Rheingold to see if it still glittered upon its protecting crag. Presently their happy noise at play attracted a passer-by, who clambered upon one of the jutting rocks to see what it was all about. The newcomer stood in the greatest contrast to the 3 laughing girls. He was a dwarf, little and ugly and crooked, with a humped back and long, claw-like fingers to match the eager, grasping look in his small eyes. He was Alberich, of the race of the Nibelungs, the earth dwarfs, who dug for treasure in the underground caverns, and hammered and toiled without ceasing for the gold that never did them any good. "Ho, ho!" he exclaimed to the maidens, "a fair morning to you!" The nymphs started in alarm at the harsh, croaking voice, nor did their first sight of the visitor reassure them, but they replied civilly enough, "A fair morning to you, sir." Then one of them darted swiftly upward, singing as she went, "Guard well the gold, 'twas just such a foe our father foretold." Nevertheless Alberich had paid no attention to the gold, so pleased was he by the nymphs and their gambols. And they in turn, losing their fear of the uncouth monster, and willing to tease him, asked him to catch them in their game of hide-and-seek. This he tried to do, but blinded by the unusual light and stumbling awkwardly over the rocks, he could never keep up with their fairy-like antics. First one and then another would come near him or ascend the rocks, but it was always just beyond his reach. Finally their laughter and teasing made him angry, and he stopped short, refusing to be made sport of any longer. Just then a ray of sunlight filtered down through the water and struck the Rheingold. Instantly it glowed as though it were a mass of flame, reflecting 100 shafts of light where one had smitten it. The whole river bed was illuminated by the glorious rays. The astonished dwarf looked toward the source of this splendor, and what he saw made his small eyes fairly bulge out with greed. Yet he concealed his amazement, and waited to learn something about this splendid treasure without betraying his own interest. Fortune favored him. His unspoken question was answered by the Rhine maidens, who surged upward with a glad cry of "The Rheingold! The Rheingold!" "What is this Rheingold you are talking about?" asked the dwarf with a great show of indifference. "What? Haven't you ever heard of the wonderful Rheingold?" asked one of the maidens thoughtlessly. "We supposed it was famed over all the world." "But I dwell in the underworld, and hear not the things which are spoken among men. Tell me of it, I pray." Then the maiden forgot her father's warning to guard the treasure closely. She also felt nothing but contempt for this awkward little man from whom they could so easily escape. She told the secret of the gold in the words of a song. "The realm of the world to him shall it bring, who out of this gold shall fashion a ring of magical power untold." Say you so?" said the dwarf, keeping his excitement down by a powerful effort, though his finger-nails fairly clawed into the flesh. "If your metal is as fine as all that, why doesn't someone lay hands upon it and do all these great things?" "Sister, sister, be careful!" said another of the nymphs. But the first only laughed and replied, "What can this silly old fellow do? Let us have some more fun teasing him." Then the third maiden floated gracefully near. "Why doesn't some one seize the gold?" she repeated. "'Tis because no one has yet been able to pay the price." "What is the price?" "This is it," she answered. "Listen. He who forswears the might of love, and all its pleasures manifold, he only has the magic art to mould the ring from out the gold." "Pish! A pretty story you are telling me," said the dwarf. "As though a little matter like doing without love should make a person master of the world." He made a great show of scorn while he said these words, but all the time he was edging quietly nearer the treasure. "But love is the greatest thing in the world," said the first maiden. "No one can do anything without its wonderful aid. Why, even you, poor old fellow, would dare not forswear it." "I would not dare forswear it, eh?" exclaimed the dwarf with a snap of his fingers and a wild laugh of triumph. "Love, forsooth! What is love to me, when gold is in question? Hark, you Rhine maidens, I renounce love for ever. Be my witness." And he sprang rapidly forward before the nymphs could prevent him, clambered up the jagged rock, and seized the coveted treasure. "Our Rheingold! Our Rheingold!" shrieked the maidens, but it was too late. Already he had disappeared in one of the clefts of rock leading to his cavernous home, and though they darted after him, they could not find him in the dark depths. Only his mocking laugh came back to them. "Ho, ho, love! When all the world shall be mine!" Now we have already seen that the nymphs and the dwarfs formed only a part of the strange world so long ago. At the very time when Alberich was stealing the gold and preparing to make the Ring of Power down under the earth, there was an unusual happening in the home of the gods, far up on the mountains. For a long time Wotan, the greatest of the gods, had desired a palace large enough to contain his kingly court. But he could find no one strong enough to build it, until on a day 2 giants from the valleys below came into his presence. Large were they of shoulder and thigh, many times larger than ordinary men. "We have come to build your palace," they said. "Who are ye?" asked Wotan, looking piercingly at them with his single eye. "I am Fafner, the frost giant," answered one. "I can rend all these rocks asunder and build your palace in a single night, with the aid of my brother Fasolt here." Wotan was overjoyed to find someone who would undertake his cherished plan. "What payment do you desire for this service?" he asked. "You must give me the hand of your beautiful sister Freia," answered Fafner. Wotan frowned. He desired the palace above all things just then, for it would enforce his visible rule over the world. But Freia was his favourite sister. Moreover, it was she who was the goddess of youth and beauty, and who tended the tree of golden apples which kept the gods always young. While Wotan was frowning and pondering to himself, his brother Loki whispered in his ear, "Let them build the palace. We shall find another way out of the bargain." Now Loki, god of fire, was the craftiest of all the gods. So when Wotan heard his whispered advice, his brow cleared, and he looked at the giants. "So be it," he commanded. "Build me the castle 'gainst another sunrise. It shall be Valhalla, the supreme home of gods and men." The giants bowed and went their way. Presently the sound of mighty blows was heard, and terrific crashes as of the bursting asunder of rocks. All the day and night the tumult continued, while the earth shook to its very foundations. The next morning the rising sun lit up a splendid spectacle. There stood Valhalla, magnificent home of the gods, upon the crest of a towering cliff. Its white walls gleamed and glistened, its towers and buttresses were built of stones so large that they seemed placed for all eternity, yet the whole mass appeared as light and graceful as a fairy vision. "Beautiful! Wonderful!" cried the gods and goddesses in rapture. "Let us take up our abode in our new home," said Wotan, with the delight of a schoolboy. But just then the two giants appeared, clad in their shaggy skins of slain animals. "Hold!" said Fafner. "First give us in payment the goddess Freia, as you promised us." "That I cannot do," replied Wotan. "You must think of some other way for me to reward you." "Not so!" exclaimed the giants angrily, their hoarse voices making all the mountain quiver. "Give us the maiden as you agreed, else we shall tear down the palace quicker than we built it." And they placed themselves on each side of the trembling Freia. "Touch her not!" cried two gods as they sprang forth to protect their sister. "Do you not know," continued one, "that I am Thor, god of thunder, and that with one blow of my hammer I can crush you both?" And he raised his hammer threateningly. But now the great Wotan interposed in his turn. "Restrain your fury!" he commanded, stretching forth the dread Spear of Authority between the giants and the gods. "By this spear the word of Wotan cannot be broken, and unless Fasolt and Fafner agree to accept other reward, they must e'en take our sister with them to the regions of frost." At this command the contending ones fell back, but there arose a low cry of fear from the lovely Freia, and a deep lamentation from the other gods. For how could they live without their sweet sister, she who gave them the apples of eternal youth? Meanwhile Wotan had been casting his eyes impatiently from side to side. He was looking for his crafty counsellor Loki, and wondering why he did not appear with his aid, since he it was who had promised to find a way out of the bargain. "Come, decide," said the giants, again stepping forward. "Only 1 hour more," pleaded Wotan. "I must confer with my counsellor, who is just now absent." "Only 1 hour, then," replied the giants. "Send out messengers in search of Loki, god of fire," commanded Wotan. "Let him be summoned instantly." But at this moment who should appear but Loki himself, walking in unconcernedly, and looking about in feigned surprise, as though he were the last person anyone would wish to see. "Good morrow, all!" he said airily. "This is a beautiful castle I see upon yon mountain height. I have just been examining it from every side, and upon my word it would defy even my arts to destroy it." "Yes, yes," replied Wotan impatiently, beginning to be a little ashamed of his fine Valhalla. "But that is not the point just now. These giants demand our sister Freia as their reward, and you remember you promised to find a substitute for her." The sly Loki arched his eyebrows in mock surprise. "A substitute for her!" he exclaimed. "Why, how could that be possible? I should think that Fasolt and Fafner would rather have her than all the treasures in the world. Is she not the goddess of youth and beauty?" At this the two gods, Thor and Fro, raised their weapons in great anger, and would have fallen upon Loki had not Wotan restrained them. He knew the cunning of the latter, and was persuaded that Loki had found a plan. "Yes," proceeded Loki, as calmly as though there had been no interruption, "all the riches in the world would not take the place of Freia. Even the far-famed Rhine gold would hardly answer. And speaking of the Rhine gold, do you know that I have just heard a strange story? While passing along the banks of the Rhine, I became aware of the sound of pitiful weeping and wailing. I turned me about to see whence the doleful sound came, and I beheld the three Rhine daughters. They were no longer joyous and carefree as was their wont, but they were beating their breasts and tearing their hair while they cried, 'Our Rhine gold! Our Rhine gold! Stolen! Stolen!'" "What? Have they suffered the Rhine gold to be stolen?" asked Wotan in alarm. "'Tis as they said, for I stopped and questioned them. They said that the dwarf Alberich had seized upon the treasure and fled away to his earth caverns, where he was even now making the magic Ring of Power. He has set himself up as King of the Nibelungs, and he purposes to rule the whole world." The giants Fafner and Fasolt leaned eagerly forward, and drank in every word of Loki's story, as indeed he had intended they should. "Ah, that would be a prize worth having!" they exclaimed, rubbing their huge hands. "Mighty Wotan, if thou wilt wrest this treasure from the Nibelung and give it to us, we will release the goddess." But Wotan again grew disturbed and silent. He knew that the gold rightfully belonged to the Rhine daughters, and that it would prove a danger even to the gods themselves unless it were returned. The giants saw their advantage and followed it up. "Decide for yourselves," they said, laying bold hands upon Freia. "Our work is done, and we claim the reward. Either this maiden or the Rhine gold, and until you decide, she must follow us to the Frost Land." And unmindful of her cries of distress, the giants bore Freia away across the cliffs and down the mountainside, the gods standing powerless to prevent. As they stood gazing in dismay, a thin mist arose from the valleys, and it seemed to touch all the gods with blight, as it were a frost, for the goddess of youth and beauty was gone, and old age had already begun to lay hand upon those that remained. "Come, this will never do!" exclaimed Loki in jeering tones. "Will you stand in your tracks and let old age blight you?" And then he began to taunt each of the gods separately, as was his wont. "Look!" cried Fricka, wife of Wotan, "the golden apples even now are withering. Wotan, husband, behold thy doom! See how thy compact hath wrought ruin and wreck for us all!" Wotan started up, fired by a sudden resolution. "Up, Loki!" he commanded. "Follow me! We must fare to the caverns of night and seize upon this gold." "And then?" asked Loki. "The Rhine daughters implored thine aid. Wilt thou restore it to them?" "'Tis idle talk," retorted Wotan moodily. "Freia, the goddess of youth and beauty, must be ransomed, else we shall all perish." "Then let us hence," said Loki, who had gained the point at which he had aimed from the outset. "Let us hence. I know a cleft in the rock, which serves as a chimney for the Nibelung's forge fires. Perchance he is even now hammering out the Ring of Power. Come, let us descend into his cavernous dwelling." So saying, the god of fire wrapped his mantle about him and set forth, closely followed by Wotan with his dread spear of authority. As two simple wayfarers they travelled down the rocky chasm, down, 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 and still down, while the hammering from the forges grew louder, and the sulphurous smoke came curling up more and more thickly, till it would have suffocated anyone but a god. At last they emerged into a huge cave, around which hurried hundreds of queer little people, each as ugly and crooked and dirty as Alberich. They were blowing the fires, pounding away with huge masses of metal, or scurrying about with armloads of gold, silver, and precious stones. Just then the two wayfarers heard a quarrelling in a side passage of the cave, when in came Alberich himself, dragging another dwarf, shrieking by the ear. It was Mime, his own brother, but that made no difference with Alberich. "Where's the helmet, you rogue?" he said. "It shall not be well with your skin if you don't give it up." "Mercy! Mercy!" howled Mime, the tears making little furrows down his dirty face. "I haven't got it done yet." "Yes, you have. What is that you are trying to hide in your hands? Give it to me, I say." And Alberich seized the object which Mime had just dropped in terror. "Ah, just as I thought," continued the stronger brother. "Here is the magic helmet all complete, and this sly knave thought to keep it for himself. But I shall pay him for his treachery. Hark, you rascals!" he continued, turning to all the dwarfs. "I am your king. You must henceforth serve me alone, and pile up all your treasure in the royal vaults. I have this day obtained the powers of magic which make you my servants. At this moment you see me not, but I shall make myself felt among you, I promise you." And with this speech he clapped the helmet upon his head, and instantly vanished. But in his stead there came a pillar of mist, and out of the mist came his voice sternly commanding them to obey. Then the sharp lashes of a whip were heard right and left, and Mime fell groaning to the ground, while the others retreated in terror, seemingly driven along a narrow way on the far side of the cavern. Alberich was beginning his reign with a vengeance. Meanwhile the two celestial visitors had stood unnoticed in a side passage. While they debated as to the best means of making their presence known, Alberich came back in his true shape, carrying the helmet in his hand, fondling the ring upon his finger, and chuckling with glee. Then he espied the two gods, and his brow wrinkled darkly. "Why come you to my caverns?" he demanded. "Know you not that I am king here, and that strangers are not welcome?" "We have but come to see some of the marvels of which we have heard so much," said Wotan pacifically. "Hum!" said Alberich. "You look quiet enough, but I think I know you both. Yet I fear you not, whether gods or men, for I am master here." "And what if we are indeed gods, dear Alberich?" said Loki, taking off his mantle. "See, I am the god of fire, and your best friend. Do I not keep all your forges going?" "Yes, that may be true," retorted Alberich. "But for all that I fear neither you nor Wotan the Mighty. With this ring made from the Rhine gold I can defy you all." Alberich's accustomed low cunning had vanished before his sudden access of power. He was no match for the crafty god Loki. "Oh, what a beautiful ring!" exclaimed the latter, bending forward admiringly. "Is it really made from the far-famed Rhine gold?" "It is," said Alberich, swelling up. "I made it myself, and its possession gives me everything in the world except love." "But some people think that love is the chief thing," said Loki. "Pooh! That's because they haven't the gold I have. The two do not go together anyway, and never will. As for me, give me gold and power." And he kissed the ring. "But what if someone stole the ring while you slept?" persisted Loki. "They couldn't," retorted the dwarf quickly. "See this helmet? That silly brother of mine yonder in the corner has just made it for me out of some more of this fine Rhine gold. With it I can change myself into any form I choose, and defy the slyest of robbers." "Oh, that cannot be," replied Loki. "Only the gods can do such things. Unless I saw such a marvel with my own eyes, I never would believe it." Alberich looked with scorn upon this doubting fellow. Then, willing to prove his boast, he put the helmet upon his head, and muttered a few words. Instantly he was gone, and in his stead a huge serpent came wriggling along the floor, stretching its hideous jaws toward Wotan and Loki. The latter fled in pretended terror, while Wotan laughed calmly. The snake then disappeared, and the dwarf once more stood before them. "Now do you doubt my power?" he asked proudly. "Oh, it was wonderful!" exclaimed Loki, rolling his eyes. "I couldn't have believed it possible. But I should think it would be a great deal harder to turn yourself into something small." "Not at all," replied the Nibelung. "Watch this." And before the gods were aware, he was gone again. They looked high and low, and there, among the small stones, a toad came hopping toward them. "Quick! Put your foot on him!" exclaimed Loki. Wotan put his boot upon the toad, and instantly it was gone, and in its place Alberich lay struggling vainly to get out. "Let me up! You are crushing me!" screamed the dwarf. "Not until you give us every bit of the Rhine gold, the helmet and the ring," said Wotan. "You can have all but the helmet and the ring, and there's a lot of it, beautiful gold," whined Alberich. "No, all of it," said Wotan. "You can have the helmet too. Oh, you're smashing me!" "The ring and all, I tell you. Here, Loki, bind him with that rope." "Then take the gold, the helmet and the ring," cried the dwarf despairingly. They bound him and let him up. As soon as he could catch his breath, he continued, "Take the ring and all, but listen well to what I say. My curse rests upon it forever. Cursed be he who owns it, whether eating or sleeping or waking. Cursed be he and all his, whether god or devil. Sorrow and unhappiness shall go with this gold through all the ends of the earth." Notwithstanding this dread curse, the gods seized the ring from off his finger, and lost no time in making off with the treasure, leaving the dwarf grovelling upon the floor, and muttering fierce words against them. All their care now was to ransom their sister, and drive away the mists of old age. On their way up the mountain height they met the two giants bearing away the struggling Freia in their clutches. "Hold!" commanded Wotan. "Bear her no farther. We have brought the gold to ransom her." "Is it the far famed Rhine gold?" asked Fafner. "See for yourselves," said Loki, casting the glittering heap upon the earth. "In all the world ye will not find its like." The giants gazed greedily upon the hoard, and drew near to parley. "'Tis indeed a wonderful treasure," they said, "but the mass must equal in height and breadth the stature of this comely goddess." "So be it," answered Wotan, and he commanded that staves be set upright in the ground, and that the gold be heaped between them. Thor and Fro and others of the gods had now arrived upon the scene, all overjoyed at the prospect of Freia's release, for already the blighting mist was beginning to lift, though it yet concealed the fair towers of Valhalla. Meanwhile Loki had been careful to withhold the ring and the helmet from the rest of the hoard, which was now quickly heaped up between the upright staves. At last, just as the gold was exhausted, the pile rose above the top of Freia's head. "Here, take the treasure," said Wotan, "and release our sister unto us." "Nay, not so," said Fafner. "I see a hole in the heap, and through it gleams the goddess's hair, brighter than any gold. You must fill the hole. Cast on the helmet which yonder Loki is bearing." Wotan could scarce restrain his rage at this rude bartering of his sister, while the impetuous Thor fingered his mighty hammer nervously. But Wotan saw it was useless to refuse. He made a sign of command to the unwilling Loki, and the latter cast the helmet on the heap. Fafner again walked around it, looking closely on every side. "Ah!" he exclaimed, "here is just one more little crack. But through it I can see the gleam of the goddess's lovely eyes. You must place the ring here to make the ransom complete." "Never!" cried Wotan furiously. "Very well, then. We shall be forced to take the goddess with us." And once more Fasolt laid his rude hands upon the shrinking maiden. Thereupon a great tumult began. The voices of the gods rose in entreaty to Wotan to give up the ring and save their sister and themselves. Thor sprang forward with uplifted hammer, while the hoarse voices of the giants bade defiance to them all. Again the dread mist crept up from the valleys, and darkness descended from the clouds. Still Wotan remained defiant. He was turning away in anger from the tumult, when out of a cleft in the rock a weird bluish light broke forth, and there emerged a woman of dignified and noble mien. Her long black hair swept upon the ground, and her flowing robe seemed made of all the leaves and growing things of the soil. She was Erda, the spirit of Mother Earth, gifted with wisdom and foresight such as was not given even to the gods themselves. Erda stretched her hand out warningly toward Wotan. "Yield, O Wotan!" she cried. "Escape the curse of the ring and all the hopeless woe it entails." "Who art thou, boding spirit?" demanded Wotan, and in a chanting voice came back the reply, "All that was I know, all that is I know, all that ever shall be done, this as well I know. Erda the name I bear, the Fates my daughters are. Danger threatens dire, this has drawn me near. Hearken, 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 all that is shall end. Heed ye well, ere dawn of doom, beware the cursed ring." As the chant ended, the bluish light died away, and with it vanished the warning figure. "Oh, stay, dread spirit!" cried Wotan. "More would I learn." But only silence answered him, and after gazing into the darkness in anxious thought, he turned suddenly and approached the giants. "Here is the Ring," said he sternly, drawing it from his finger and placing it upon the heap. "Begone, and leave us our sister. But a curse has fallen upon the Gold." And so it proved. The gods themselves were witness of the first fruits of the curse, for as the two giants fell greedily to work gathering up the treasure, a dispute arose. Fasolt claimed that Fafner was taking more than his rightful share. They came to blows over it, when Fafner smote Fasolt to the ground with a blow so heavy that it killed him. Then the victor, unmindful of his deed, hastily gathered up all the wealth and departed, while the gods stood around silent and amazed that the curse should descend so swiftly. And Wotan foresaw in this tragic moment the awful doom which was one day to descend upon them all, because the Gold had not been restored to the Rhine daughters. But his gloomy thoughts were broken just then by a mighty crash, like a peal of thunder. There, upon the cliff leading to the beautiful new palace, which had cost so much, stood Thor, wielding his hammer upon the encircling clouds. Flashes of lightning burst forth. The clouds and mist rolled away, revealing Valhalla in all its splendour, while from their feet in dazzling radiance gleamed a rainbow bridge leading across the chasm to its portals. "Come, let us go over to our new home," said Wotan, taking his wife Fricka by the hand. And followed by the laughing gods and goddesses who surrounded Freia, fairest of the group, they went across the rainbow bridge and entered the stately halls of Valhalla. The setting sun shone brightly on the scene. The clouds had melted away into blue sky, leaving a soft radiance which seemed to encircle their new home in a halo of delight. The evening fragrance of the valleys came up to them redolent with the springtime of growing things. As they trod the shining pathway, the jests and merriment of the gods showed their gladness in this new home that had been made for them at so great a cost. Still Wotan was not happy. He had decided seemingly for the best, but as he crossed the arching bridge he heard voices from the valley far beneath him, rising like the tones of conscience or the warnings of fate. It was the mournful song of the Rhine daughters. "Rhine gold, purest gold, how fair thy gleam, thy wealth untold! But now thy rays light not the stream, and give them back, give back the gleam, Rhine gold." End of Story 1. Part 1, Story 2 of Tales from Wagner by J. Walker McSpadden. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Part 1, The Ring of the Curse. Story 2, The War Maidens, Die Walküre. The new home of the gods proved to be as beautiful within as it had appeared without. When they had all crossed the arching rainbow bridge, loud shouts of joy and admiration arose, for it was the most splendid palace that gods or mortals could ever imagine. Long porticos and galleries with huge sculptured pillars ran in every direction, leading to cool fruit arbours or open courts where silvery fountains splashed. Great rooms opened up with ceilings so high that they seemed to take in the sky itself. The spacious floors were paved with burnished gold, and the walls set with polished stone and fine jewels, so that they blazed with light as bright as the noonday. On every side of the palace were smooth greenswards and groves of stately trees, And in the midst of the largest grove of all grew the wonderful tree bearing apples of gold, from which Freya fed all the divine family to make them immortal. For a long time the gods and goddesses lived in Valhalla quite happily. Each morning they found some new beauty to admire. Each evening they came together for a feast or entertainment. But in one heart there was no happiness, and that was the heart of the mighty Wotan himself. His beautiful home, the dream of his life, was finished. But at what a cost! The curse of the Rhine Gold would come upon them unless the stolen treasure were returned to its rightful guardians. The gods themselves would be destroyed if they kept not their honour. So Wotan sat apart from the rest, and his brow grew dark with forebodings. Fricka, his wife, gently chided him for his gloom, but to no avail, and even the beautiful Freya could no longer make him smile. When any of the other gods praised the beauty of the palace, he would nod his head and answer, "Its price was great." Finally Wotan could endure his anxiety no longer. Knowing that unless some way were found to restore the gold they would be in constant peril, he resolved to consult Erda, the earth spirit. So one day he took his spear of authority and went forth into the world to find a way out of the trouble which had come to him with Valhalla. The weeks grew into months, and the months into years, while Wotan was gone. The other gods sought him in vain, but could hear no tidings. They wondered what had become of him, and the feasting and revelry gave way to sad forebodings. Only Fricka the Queen went about with some measure of confidence. "Be not sad," she said. "Wotan will return soon, bringing with him some great means of safety and content." Fricka spoke true. One fair day at early dawn the gods were awakened by the sound of warlike singing. It was entirely different from their own music, and it seemed borne to them on the wings of the wind. Nearer and nearer came the song, swelling into a splendid strain of triumph. Then flying figures were descried, and the watchers at the window saw Wotan returning to them as it were through the clouds. He was in the midst of a company of maidens, whose faces were fair, but who were strong and soldier-like. Each rode upon a powerful horse, and, wonder of wonders, the horses had wings like eagles, and flew swiftly through the air. There were 9 of these horses and riders in all, and so fast did they ride that they had reached the palace gates, dismounted, and were being led within by Wotan almost before the first strains of music had died away. You may believe that all the gods and goddesses were exceedingly glad when they saw Wotan again, and they hastened out upon the battlements to greet him and give him love and honour. To one and all he replied full pleasantly. His brow was clearer than it had been in many a day, and it was with the sprightliness of youth that he led the 9 fair warriors up the broad palace steps. Then turning he addressed his court. "These are the War Maidens," he said, "who come to guard our kingdom from its enemies. It is their mission to ride up and down in all the world, to choose the bravest heroes who have fallen in battle, and to bring them to Valhalla. With all these heroes we shall be protected from peril in the evil days to come." Then Wotan introduced each War Maiden by name, beginning with Brunhilde, who was the strongest and the loveliest. And they were welcomed royally to the palace by all who lived therein. The golden apples of life were given them to eat, and they became immortal. Day by day the War Maidens rode forth into battle, seeking for the bravest men. Whenever they found one who had fallen in the forefront of conflict, they carried him to Valhalla, where he became immortal. There was much fighting in the world in those days, so the palace soon received many mighty soldiers, and Wotan grew light of heart. For now he thought he could defy the dwarf's curse and all the powers of the underworld. So he trained his soldiers constantly, and had them continually in battle, one against another. And if one by chance received a wound, it healed of itself through magic power. Still the loss of the gold and of the ring was an ever-present danger. Wotan knew this, and cast about for some means to restore the treasure to the Rhine daughters, so that the peril might be removed. Now Fafner the giant had taken the gold to a cave in the midst of a dense forest. By the aid of the magic helmet he had changed himself into a fierce dragon, and in this shape he guarded the mouth of the cave night and day. So you see that he wasn't getting very much pleasure out of his hoard. Being a god, Wotan of course knew where Fafner the dragon lay hid, but neither he nor any of the gods could attack Fafner or lay hands upon the treasure. It had been given the giant in open barter, and so was beyond their recall. But Wotan reasoned that if some earth-born hero could be found brave enough to slay the dragon, the gold could be secured. Failing this, the dwarf Alberich might in the end be crafty enough to regain it and wreak his vengeance upon the gods. The peril was still great, therefore, in spite of the warriors in Valhalla. Wotan realized all this, and resolved to journey again through the world in quest of a hero to attack the dragon. For many days he searched without success. Then he chose a son of his own for the great task, living with him as a simple forester while the boy grew up, and training him to warlike deeds. The boy's name was Siegmund, and as he reached young manhood he was straight as a young pine tree in the forest, and strong as the oak which defies the winds of heaven. While Siegmund was still a youth, a great sorrow befell him. Sieglinde, a young girl of his own age with whom he had grown up, and whom he looked upon as a sister, was seized by a fierce hunter and carried away to his home in the forest. For many months Siegmund sought to rescue her, but without success. He grew to manhood with this object before him, and vowed eternal warfare against the hunter and all his clan, a vow Wotan aided him to keep, until the very name of Siegmund became a terror to the hunter. Then another sudden grief befell the young warrior. Wotan mysteriously went away one day, leaving no trace and no message, save that when Siegmund should be in direst need, he would find a trusty sword at hand to aid him. Siegmund now felt forsaken indeed, and he roamed about aimlessly in the forests, hunting the wild beasts, helping people in distress, or fighting against the hunter's tribe. One night, utterly spent from his wanderings, he sought shelter in a house built in a peculiar manner round the trunk of a great oak tree. Seeing no one within the main room, he entered, closed the door behind him, and lay down exhausted in front of the fire, where he soon fell fast asleep. Presently a maiden came into the room. She expected to find the hunter there, for this was none other than his house, although Siegmund did not know it. When, instead of the master of the house, the maiden saw the stranger lying upon the hearth, she sprang back in sudden fear. But the poor man did not move, so she came gently to his side to see whether he were alive or dead. Siegmund stirred uneasily in his sleep, then, wakening, tried to utter a few words, but his parched lips gave forth little sound. Seeing his pitiable state, the maiden hastened to give him a drink. It revived him somewhat, and he sat up and gazed around. The maiden gave him more of the cup, and gently asked him whence he came. He answered, and began telling her of his wanderings, without revealing his name. Just then the hunter himself arrived, but neither he nor Siegmund recognized the other as his sworn enemy, and the hunter, noting the young man's distressed condition, bade him welcome for the night, and invited him to the table to share his food. Siegmund accepted the invitation joyfully, and soon found his strength returning to him in the meat and drink. In answer to his host's questions, he told the story of his past adventures, and the hunter found for the first time that his guest was the foe whom he had long been seeking to slay. "Ha! I know you now!" he exclaimed, springing to his feet. "It is you who have done so much harm to me and mine. I would make you answer for your deeds here and now, were it not for the sacred laws of hospitality. But to-morrow I shall meet you. At sunrise be ready to fight and give me full satisfaction." Siegmund was astonished in his turn, but could not refuse the challenge. The hunter left him with these words, bidding the maiden also go into another room. Left to himself, the young man fell again into heaviness of spirit. It seemed to him that sorrow and trouble had followed him all the days of his life. He mused over his present defenceless condition, alone, unarmed, and under his enemy's very roof. Then he recalled his father's promise, that a sword would be ready at his hand when his need was direst. Somehow the thought of this promise brought comfort to him, and he fell into a quiet slumber. After a time, during the stillness of night, a door opened softly, and the maiden came toward him. "Up!" she said, gently rousing him. "Up, and flee for your life! The hunter has been planning mischief against you, but I gave him a sleeping draught." "Why should I flee?" said Siegmund. "Give me but a sword, and I turn my back upon no man. But who are you, fair lady, who do this kindness to a stranger? Methinks I have seen your face in earlier days than this." "And I also seem to remember you," she answered, gazing at him earnestly. "My story is not a long one, but it is sad. When I was a little girl, this cruel hunter carried me away from home, and he has compelled me to live with him ever since. But one day during a feast a strange-looking man with only one eye came in, bearing a mighty sword. He drove the sword to the hilt in the trunk of yonder tree with one sweep of his arm, declaring that it was for only one man, the man who should be able to pull it forth again. Many stout men that day and since have tried to claim the sword, but there it sticks. There you may see the firelight strike the handle. Perchance, poor stranger, it was left for you." "Ah, now I know my father's words were true!" Siegmund cried joyously. "See, the sword is mine!" And laying hold of the handle, he drew the shining blade as easily as though the tree had been its scabbard. "And thou also, I know, my heart's best. Thou art Sieglinde, for whom I have sought all these years. Dost thou not remember thine old playmate, Siegmund?" She gazed at him first with startled look, then a tender light of memory and love dawned in her eyes. Siegmund stretched out his arms to her, and the two were united in a fond embrace. "Come," said Siegmund, "now will I flee, and thou must go with me. My father's sword shall shield us both, and never again while I live shall this robber have thee in his clutches." The moon was shining brightly on this warm night in early spring. The wide world seemed to beckon her two children forth, and answering her summons and the glad call of their own hearts, they fled away. King Wotan knew of all these things. He knew that his dearly loved son Siegmund had found the magic sword, and had fled from the hunter's home. He foresaw also that the hunter would rise up full of wrath the next day, and pursue Siegmund to kill him. This must be prevented. The god summoned Brunhilde before him. "Wisest and fairest of war maidens," he said, "in yonder mountain gorge thou wilt discover a young man and a maiden who are dear to me. The maiden has been stolen away from a hunter who held her against her will, and the hunter now pursues the young man with intent to slay him. It is my will that he be not slain, but that he gain the victory over the hunter. See thou to it." Brunhilde gladly listened to Wotan's behest. "It shall be done as thou desirest," she exclaimed. "Hoyo to ho!" The musical shout of the War Maidens came from her lips as she sprang from cliff to cliff and disappeared. But she had hardly gone before Fricka, Wotan's queen, entered in a chariot drawn by two rams. Now Fricka was goddess of love and justice, and it grieved her that Siegmund should be allowed to take Sieglinde away with him as he had done. "Justice, O Wotan!" she cried, "against the young man Siegmund. The hunter from whose house he fled away, carrying the maiden Sieglinde, has called to me for help, and I have promised to aid him." "The hunter held the maiden against her will," replied Wotan. "Natheless his right to her had become recognized among men, so she must be restored to him, else men will say that there is no justice in the world." Wotan's brow was wrinkled moodily. He knew that Sieglinde had dwelt so many years under the hunter's roof that all men believed she rightfully belonged there. Yet in his heart he longed to protect his son. Fricka saw the struggle, but would not relent. She added many words to what she had said, and urged her case so strongly that every law the gods had made seemed enlisted in the hunter's cause. At last Wotan, heavy in spirit, agreed to give the victory to him. After Fricka had departed, he called Brunhilde again to him and told her of his last decision. Brunhilde was full of grief when she learned that she must aid the hunter against Siegmund. "Why dost thou do this, O father?" she asked gently. "Because the laws of the gods demand it," he answered. Then the sorrow-stricken Wotan unburdened his heart to her, and told her of the Rhine Gold, of the ring that had been fashioned from it, of the curse that had followed, and of many other things which we have set forth in this book. "The curse of the ring is the fate of Siegmund," he concluded. "That is why I am powerless to protect him. See that thou dost obey my latest command." So saying, he departed amid the rumblings of a thundercloud, leaving Brunhilde full of sorrow at the strange tale she had heard, and the sad errand she must perform. But she turned her steps dutifully down the mountain gorge, and there in a sheltering cave she found the young man and maiden. Sieglinde had become tired out from their wanderings, and Siegmund had borne her into the cave and was supporting her head upon his knee, while smoothing back the stray locks of gold from her lovely forehead. So intent was he upon this devotion that he did not see Brunhilde when she came into the entrance. If the War Maiden had longed to befriend these two before she saw them, how much more did her heart soften when she beheld this sweet picture! But her duty must be done. She called softly to Siegmund, and he raised his head. "I am the War Maiden," she said, "and am sent to warn thee of thy fate. Thine enemy follows hard upon thy heels, and none who look upon my face survive a battle." "I fear not for the battle," answered Siegmund stoutly. "This magic sword was left me by my father, and with it I must surely be victorious." "It will avail thee not, for the gods have decreed that thou must die. But glory awaits thee in Valhalla, whither I am summoned to bear thee after death." "What is Valhalla?" he asked. "It is the hall of heroes, among whom thou wilt be first." "Will I find my father there, and my sweet comrade Sieglinde?" The search for these two had consumed the youthful warrior's whole life, so his voice trembled eagerly as he asked the question. Brunhilde smiled, then shook her head sadly. "Thy father? Yes, in Valhalla shalt thou find him, but Sieglinde cannot come to thee there." "Then take my greetings to Valhalla!" he exclaimed. "Greet for me, Wotan, hail to my father and all the heroes, hail the War Maidens, for now I follow not thee." By this time Brunhilde's heart had become so touched that she boldly resolved to disobey Wotan's last command, and do as he really desired. Smiling upon Siegmund, she bade him be of good heart, as she had only been testing his courage. Then she told him she would be with him and aid him in the coming strife. Even while she spoke, the hunter's horn was heard, and soon the man himself came hastening fiercely along. He did not see Siegmund at first, for a heavy storm had come up, while the heavens seemed rent with terrific crashes of thunder. The din finally aroused the sleeping Sieglinde, and she gazed around wildly. Siegmund had sprung out of the cave to confront his enemy, and there in front of the cave he stood revealed by a flash of lightning, battling strongly with the hunter. Sieglinde uttered a cry of grief and was about to rush between them, when another sudden blaze of light made her draw back. At one side she beheld the War Maiden standing ready to protect Siegmund. The young man pressed upon the hunter and was about to strike him to the earth with his trusty sword, when a glowing red flame burst through the clouds. Wotan himself appeared with his dread spear and stretched it across the sword. The magic blade broke in sunder, and Siegmund fell dead, pierced by the hunter's weapon. But the hunter himself did not survive the conflict, for a glance from the single blazing eye of the angry god stretched him lifeless on the sward. When Wotan appeared, Brunhilde started back, amazed and fearful. She began to realize what it meant to disobey the god's command. Hastily seizing the fainting form of Sieglinde, she sprang upon her winged steed and fled swiftly from the tragic scene. Far and fast through the storm she sped, glancing around fearfully ever and anon, and fancying each rumble of the thunder was Wotan's voice. Then she turned her horse's head toward the summit of a lofty crag. It was the usual meeting place of all the War Maidens on their way to Valhalla. Soon the crag came in sight, and there awaiting her were her 8 companions, hailing her swift approach with "Hoyo to ho!" their battle cry. Hardly taking time to answer their joyous greetings, Brunhilde placed Sieglinde gently on the ground and cried, "Save us, O my sisters, save us from the wrath of Wotan!" "Why, what crime hast thou committed?" cried the other War Maidens in alarm. "I have disobeyed the god's command, and even now he rides hard after me under the wings of the tempest. Save this innocent mortal at least. She has done no wrong." "I do not wish for life!" exclaimed Sieglinde, who had just recovered consciousness. "Why should I live when Siegmund is dead? I pray you draw your sword and slay me." "Not so," said Brunhilde soothingly. "The Fates decree that thou must live. And see, I have saved for thee the Sword of Need, which was broken in Siegmund's hands. Keep it for his son, the hero who shall know no fear, and he shall do mighty deeds with the mended blade." So saying, Brunhilde drew from the folds of her cloak the two pieces of the broken sword and gave them to Sieglinde, and whispered in her ear words of tenderness and balm. And Sieglinde's face lost its hopeless look, and she promised to go wherever the War Maiden might direct. "Haste thee then," urged Brunhilde. "The time is short. In only one place wilt thou be safe from Wotan, and that is the depth of yonder forest. There dwells Fafner the dragon, and there Wotan never ventures, because of the curse of the Ring." The tempest had increased in fury while Brunhilde was speaking. The dense darkness shielded Sieglinde while she hurried away. She was scarce gone, hugging the precious sword, when a terrific clap of thunder shook the whole cliff, and Wotan appeared in a flash of light. "Brunhilde! Brunhilde!" he called. Brunhilde did not answer, and the other War Maidens, braving his anger through loyalty and love for their sister, hid her in their midst. "Brunhilde!" again thundered Wotan. "Stand forth! Art afraid to hear thy doom?" "Not so, O mighty father!" replied Brunhilde, and she stepped forward proudly and knelt at his feet. "Ah, Brunhilde, how couldst thou disobey my command?" asked Wotan, more in sadness than in anger. "Thou hast brought thy fate upon thyself." "I but tried to save one who was dear to thee," she answered. "But thou didst violate my will, and henceforth can be a War Maiden no more. Thou must descend to earth, lose thy immortality, and live the life of any other woman." On hearing this terrible decree, by which she lost the rank of goddess, Brunhilde sank upon the ground with a piteous cry. "Have mercy, O Wotan!" she pleaded. "I tried to meet the wishes of thy heart, as given in thy first command. Do not banish me forever from my dear sisters and thy beloved presence. Have mercy!" "Have mercy!" cried her sisters, stretching out their hands towards the god. "Silence!" said Wotan solemnly. "I have spoken, and it must be done. O dearly loved maiden, how gladly would I save thee if it were so decreed! But thou must sink to the ground in deep sleep. And it shall come to pass that in after years the man who shall awaken thee shall claim thee for his bride. As for ye other maidens," he continued, glancing around with a flash of the eye, "beware how ye fail to keep faith with me again, and come not again into my presence this day." The War Maidens fled in woe and terror at this speech, leaving Brunhilde and Wotan alone upon the rock. The sky was clearing, the wind was dying away, and the moon came forth and looked down upon the scene. There was silence for many long moments, until Brunhilde, unable to endure it, rose slowly to her feet in all her beauty and pride, yet with wild entreaty in her voice. "O father, father!" she pleaded, "save me from this fate, for the honour of all the gods. Do not place me within reach of any coward among men who might chance to awaken me. If I must fall asleep to wake a mortal woman, grant me this last request. Place me in some spot so hedged about with danger that none but the bravest of all men may find me and claim me for his own." Wotan gazed at her, all the old love and pride for her shining in his eyes. He gently drew her to him and kissed her upon the eyelids. "It shall be as thou dost wish," he said. I shall shield thee with a barrier of living fire, so that none save a true hero can rescue thee. And now farewell, my darling child. How I shall miss thee in Valhalla, and on our rides of glory, thou dost little know. Farewell, farewell." Brunhilde clasped her arms around his neck and smiled for the last time in his face. He bent down and kissed her again and yet again. A deep sleep came over her, and she sank slowly down. Wotan carried her tenderly to a low mound of moss upon the very crest of the towering rock, and there he placed his shield over her to protect her from all harm. Again he gazed long and mournfully on her features, then closed the visor of the helmet she wore, and turning, began a mystic waving of his spear of authority. He ended by summoning Loki, god of fire. "Loki, hark, hitherward haste, as I found thee first in a fiery waste, as once thou didst fly in fiery display, as then I did call thee, I call thee to-day. Arise with thy flaming, encircle this place, to daunt the craven whom my spear could not face. Loki, Loki, arise!" At the last call he struck the rock thrice with his spear, and instantly a stream of fire gushed forth and licked upward in tongues of flame from every side. Higher and wider they spread, leaping and crackling, till they formed a complete circle round the mossy bed where Brunhilde lay sleeping. And as they swept upward in the night air, they seemed to blend in strains of music sweet as the strumming of a harp, and soft as the lullaby of a mother crooning her child to sleep. End of Story 2. Part 1, Story 3 of Tales from Wagner by J. Walker McSpadden. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Part 1, The Ring of the Curse. Story 3, Siegfried the Fearless. Several years passed by while Brunhilde lay in her enchanted sleep. Summers and winters came and went, yet still she lay there, unharmed in her magic circle of fire, and growing no whit older than when she first sank down in slumber in all her youth and beauty. Down in the depths of the forest, far below the crag on which she rested, Fafner the dragon still guarded the Rhine-golden ring. He had come to be known only as the Dragon, because, giant though he was, he had always been afraid to leave this hideous shape, lest some one should overcome him and seize the treasure. And he had good cause to fear. Although the gold bore a curse with it, there was more than one who sought to lay hand upon it. Wotan the Mighty had even forsaken the beautiful palace of Valhalla, which cost him so much, and was now roaming over the earth seeking some hero to slay the dragon. He had indeed come to be known as the Wanderer, because of his constant search. The dwarfs also had by no means forgotten the glittering hoard which had been taken away from them. Alberich went about in sullen discontent, biding his time, while Mime, his brother who had made the magic helmet, could not forget the gold night or day. Mime knew where the dragon lay hid, so he set about laying plans to outwit or slay him. Now the dwarfs had always lived deep down in the caves of the earth. They had seemed actually afraid of the sunlight, and it may be that they were afraid of their own shadows, for no greater cowards ever lived. But with all their cowardice they were sly, and had a wonderful faculty of finding out all sorts of secrets. Mime had discovered the whole story of the gold, the helmet, the ring, the curse, the building of Valhalla, and the dread which had fallen upon the gods. He learned of all this and many other things, and he laughed and rubbed his hands craftily. "Ah," he said, "I will find a way to seize the ring and rule the whole world. I will watch this dragon day and night, and sooner or later I shall surprise him." So Mime the dwarf summoned up courage enough to appear above ground. He betook himself to Fafner's forest, where he soon found the huge monster crouched before the door of his cave. For many days and nights Mime lay hid, waiting for a chance to slip past the great beast, but no such chance came. "I shall have to kill him," said Mime to himself, and at the bare thought his teeth chattered with fear. "But even if I had a sword stout enough and long enough to reach his heart, I should never have courage enough to wield it." This thought was very discouraging to him, yet he was unwilling to give up hope of the gold. For many more days he pondered and plotted, till at last he thought of a plan. "I have it!" he exclaimed, slapping his thigh. "I shall build a blacksmith's forge hard by here in the wood, where I shall make nothing but swords. At last my skill will bring forth the best blade in the world, and I shall offer it to the mightiest hero who may come riding by. Who knows, perhaps one will be found brave enough to fight the dragon when I tell him just how to do it. Then after he kills the dragon, we will see." He chuckled at the cunning plan he had made, while the evil light in his eyes boded no good for the after fate of the chosen hero. This plan seemed wild, yet it was the best that offered, so Mime began at once. He built his smithy, and having been used to this trade all his life in the underworld, he speedily felt quite at home. Soon his forge fires shone brightly through the forest, and the sound of his hammering disturbed the birds and beasts. One day, during a lull in his work, he heard a faint tap at his door. He asked harshly who was there, but receiving no reply, he peered cautiously outside. There on the threshold lay a poor woman feebly holding a little child in her arms. Her strength seemed spent, and even the rough Mime felt pity for her distress. He carried her into the smithy and laid her near the forge fire, then hastened to pour some cordial down her throat. The drink revived her slightly, and she sat up and tried to lift the child. "Take care of him!" she gasped. "His name is Siegfried. He comes from a race of heroes." "How am I to know that he is of hero born?" asked the dwarf bluntly. "Here, here!" she answered eagerly, drawing some fragments of a sword from the folds of her dress. "It was his father's sword, the wonderful sword of need. Keep it safe for him, and he shall do mighty deeds." Her voice trailed into silence, and the dwarf bending down perceived that she was dead. It was poor Sieglinde who had hid away from the wrath of Wotan as Brunhilde had bidden her. At last her sad life was ended, and perchance her spirit found peace with that of Siegmund in some happier clime. Mime now turned his attention to the little child for the first time. He saw that its limbs were sturdily knit, and that already it held its head erect and looked one squarely in the eye, which was more than the dwarf had ever done in his whole life. "Who knows?" muttered Mime. "This may be the hero for whom I have been waiting. I will bring him up as my son, and train him to my set purpose. At any rate, he could soon be useful blowing the fire." So he adopted the little Siegfried and cared for him, during his helpless days, in a dwarf's rude way. He hollowed out a log for the baby's cradle, and spread a bearskin over it. He gave him goat's milk to drink, and let him play with the broken handles of swords. Every fair morning he carried him out into the bright sunshine, and left him to kick his heels and shout back answers to the singing birds. But the dwarf himself rarely ventured outdoors. He seemed to prefer the soot and smoke of his forge fire. He hammered away and hummed a moody tune, and took comfort in thinking of the day when this foster child should be sent to slay the dragon. But if Mime had expected the lad to mend the fires and work in the shop, he soon found himself mistaken. The little fellow thrived wonderfully, and took to the life of the forest naturally. On the other hand, he had no use for the forge, or, it must be confessed, for his foster father. He soon came to despise the dwarf as a coward, for he himself showed no fear of anything. So he roamed every day in the forest, returning only at nightfall with some animal he had slain. Once he harnessed a wild bear with ropes and drove it into the blacksmith's shop, nearly causing Mime to fly out of his wits from terror. When Siegfried arrived at young manhood, he was a goodly sight to look upon. His limbs were strong and powerful, yet rounded and graceful. His skin was tinged with the ruddy hue of outdoor life. His fair hair fell in soft curls to his shoulders, as the manner then was, and his blue eyes met one's look frankly and fearlessly. Though he had been taught to look upon Mime as his father, Siegfried soon rejected this belief with scorn. He felt no love for the dwarf, such as a son would feel, and he could not help contrasting his own powerful frame and courage with the smith's weak, cringing way. The only tie which now bound them together was a promise made by the dwarf that he would forge a sword with which Siegfried could win every battle. The young man waited impatiently for this sword to be made, and Mime actually worked early and late to finish it. But alas, no sooner would he temper a blade so that it seemed perfect, when Siegfried would return from the chase and say, "Ho, this is the sword you have made for me to-day?" And he would shiver it to bits upon the anvil. This went on day after day, until Siegfried lost all patience and began to threaten the dwarf. "Hark you, Mime," he cried, "give me the stout blade you promised, or it will not go well with you to-morrow night." "You would not harm your father," whined the dwarf. "Remember how I cared for you and sheltered you." "I have long since paid that score in meat and skins," answered Siegfried. "And as for you being my father, you know that is false. Answer me directly. I would know who my father was." His manner was so threatening that the dwarf was thoroughly frightened. I do not know who your father was," he stammered. "Your mother was Sieglinde, a poor woman whom I sheltered here when you were a baby. She gave me an old broken sword. See, here it is." And he rummaged beneath a pile of skins and brought to light the pieces of the magic Sword of Need. "Ha! That is good metal!" cried Siegfried as he examined it. "I will have no sword but this. See to it that 'tis mended for me 'gainst another night." The smith promised, though in a quaking voice, for he was by no means certain that he could mend the weapon. His fears were well founded. When he tried to do so the next day, the pieces refused to unite in his hands. After making repeated attempts, he sank down behind the anvil in despair. At this moment a strange-looking man entered the doorway. He was tall and powerful. He wore a long dark cloak, and carried a spear instead of a staff. On his head was a large hat, whose broad brim shaded one eye that was evidently injured or missing. "The Wanderer!" muttered the dwarf in abject fear. It was indeed Wotan the Wanderer. "What are you doing here?" he demanded in a voice of thunder, pointing to the broken blade. I am trying to mend the Sword of Need," said the dwarf. He knew there was no use in telling an untruth, as Wotan had already recognized the weapon. "Where did you get it?" Wotan asked. "'Twas given me by Sieglinde, the mother of Siegfried. Mercy, mercy, I cannot mend it." "Peace, fool! You speak truth. No one but the hero who knows no fear can weld those pieces together." So saying, he struck his spear upon the floor with a noise like thunder, and turning, strode away into the forest. Mime dared not look after him or ask any questions. Indeed, he was in such utter terror that he did not venture from behind the anvil, where he lay hid all day. And here it was that Siegfried found him when he returned home. "Mime, have you got my sword done yet?" he called. "Pardon, pardon!" whined the dwarf. "Oh, I have had such an awful scare!" "A scare? What is that?" asked Siegfried. "I mean, I have been in dreadful fear," answered Mime. "Fear? What is that?" asked Siegfried. "Know you not what fear is?" said Mime, starting up, and remembering Wotan's words that only the hero who knew no fear could mend the sword. The young man shook his head. Mime pressed the subject further. "Suppose you should meet a great monster in the forest," he said, "a huge dragon whose eyes and mouth shot fire, whose tail lashed this way and that, tearing down the trees, whose tongue was sharp as a sword, and whose terrible fangs could crush you like an insect. Suppose this terrible dragon should come rushing down to devour you. How would you feel?" "There is no such beast as that," replied Siegfried, smiling. "Oh, but there is!" urged the dwarf, his own eyes growing big with alarm as he thought of Fafner. "There is! Down in the depths of this very forest lurks a dragon 10 times more dreadful than I have said. He lies crouched in a thicket before a cave, and even the gods are afraid to come near him." "Then he would be worth fighting!" exclaimed Siegfried with flashing eyes. "Forge me this sword as you promised, and then show me the way to his lair." "I cannot mend the blade," confessed Mime sullenly. "Only he who has no fear in his heart can mend it or wield it." Siegfried glanced at him a moment in anger. Then, as if despairing of getting the dwarf to do the work, he seized the fragments with one hand and the bellows with the other. "Stand aside!" he commanded. "I will mend the blade." And he set to work while the dwarf looked on in wonder. First Siegfried took a file and began rubbing the steel into fine powder. "Stop!" screamed the dwarf. "You are ruining it!" "Oh, no, I am not!" laughed Siegfried, filing the faster. Soon the sword, all but the handle, was changed into powder. Then Siegfried placed the powder over the fire and blew a bright blaze underneath it. And as he worked the bellows, he sang from pure joy in his work. Ho, 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 ha, hi, ha, hi, bellows blow the flame on high. The sword of need will soon be made, and then aloft I shall flash my blade. Ho, ho, ha, hi, bellows blow the blaze on high. Deep in the wood there lived a tree, its ashes here in the flames I see. Ho, ho, ha, hi, bellows blow the tree must die. But the flashing fire hath won its way, it sputters and flares in the metal spray. When he finished the song, the powder had become a molten mass. He ran this into a mould and plunged it into the water. The loud hiss of cooling metal was heard. Presently he seized the new blade with a pair of pincers and heated it red hot. Allowing it to remain but a moment in the coals, he placed it upon the anvil and beat it mighty blows till the blade was sharp and thin. Then, heating it once more, he fastened it to the handle. He swung the weapon critically and tested its temper. Again he heated it, and beat it till the shop was filled with flying sparks. But now it emerged bright and keen, the most perfect blade in all the world. And triumphantly he sang, "Ah, sword of need, anew thou art wrought, back into life and strength thou art brought. See, Mime, this is the sword I wished you to forge." And making the sword whistle about his head, he brought it down squarely upon the anvil. From top to bottom the heavy anvil was cleaved, falling into 2 pieces with a thunderous noise. "Farewell!" cried Siegfried. "The smithy sees me no more from this day. I go to seek the dragon." And he hurried forth with his wonderful new sword into the forest. "Wait a minute!" called Mime, running after him. "You cannot find the cave unless I show you the way." "I thought you were too great a coward for that," laughed Siegfried. "Who's afraid?" panted the dwarf as he caught up with him. "Besides, I'm only going to point out the place. You are the one that's going to be eaten." In fact, Mime was quite anxious to have the young man meet the dragon. No matter how the fight turned out, he reasoned that he himself would be the gainer. In the event of Siegfried killing the beast and escaping unharmed, Mime intended to give him a poisonous draught which he had prepared. Then, with both these foes out of the way, the dwarf believed that the wonderful gold of the curse would be his without any further struggle. But in this Mime was wrong, for his brother Alberich, who had first stolen the gold from the Rhine maidens, was even then watching the dragon's cave, and had been on guard there night and day. Wotan the Wanderer found him there upon the day of fate, and unheeding the dwarf's taunts and reproaches, told him of Siegfried's and Mime's approach. Alberich now hid behind some rocks to watch what would happen. "See, that is the cave," said Mime, pointing it out to Siegfried when they were still some distance away. "I can go no further, as I am very tired from running to catch up with you. But go straight ahead, and I wish you success, and the dragon an equal amount." The last words he muttered to himself, then scurried for a safe place where he could watch the fight. It was a beautiful morning, and the birds were carolling sweetly in the tree tops. Siegfried cast himself down upon the sward to rest himself and enjoy the quiet sylvan scene a little while. The birds seemed to be talking to him. He could not understand their sweet language, but he tried to imitate it upon a reed whistle. Failing in his attempt, he seized the horn which was slung around his shoulders, and blew a loud clear note as a challenge to the dragon. At once a tremendous crashing sound was heard in a near-by thicket. "Ah, that must be the dragon," said Siegfried, craning his neck without getting up. Again he heard the roar, followed by a terrible snorting and hissing and yawning, and out came a huge lizard-like serpent, plunging through the underbrush toward him. "Who are you?" it growled. "Oh, you can talk, can you?" said Siegfried. "I am a man who has been sent to you to learn what fear is." "You will find out if you live long enough," roared the dragon, showing its fangs and licking out a long forked tongue. "I will devour you in 2 mouthfuls." "Oh, no," laughed Siegfried, "I object. But if you do not teach me what fear is, it will be the worse for you." This taunt angered the dragon, as Siegfried intended. It sprang forward, lashing about with its tail, and poured forth flame and smoke from its nostrils. Siegfried leaped easily to one side and evaded both dangers. The dragon turned upon him at close range and struck again with its tail. Siegfried vaulted high in the air, so that the tail swept the ground smoothly under him without touching. Quick as a flash he smote the scaly back with his keen sword, so that the black blood poured forth in torrents. The dragon uttered loud bellows of rage and pain, and reared upon Siegfried with the forepart of its body in order to crush him. But as it reared, its breast was exposed, and Siegfried was swift to seize his advantage. With a powerful blow he drove the sword of need up to the hilt in the monster's heart. "Woe is me!" gasped the dragon, rolling upon the earth in a dying condition. "Reckless youth, do you know what you've done?" "I know I have slain a foul beast, because he would not teach me fear." "Ah, I perceive you are the tool of others," said the dragon in a weak voice. "Know then that I am Fafner, the last of the giants' race. I guarded the Rhine-Gold, but beware of it. A curse follows all who possess it. Beware!" Then with a dreadful groan the dragon expired. Siegfried drew his sword from its breast, and as he did so a drop of blood fell upon his hand. It burned like a coal of fire, and instinctively he licked it with his tongue to stop the pain. Suddenly a strange new power came upon him. He knew not what it was, but stood silent and amazed, waiting to discover what it could be. Then in the silence a bird sang to him from a linden tree, the same song he had heard before, but this time he could understand it. It was as though the bird were speaking his own tongue. "The Rhine-Gold is now yours," it sang. "There in the cave you will find it. Be careful to take also the helmet of darkness and the ring of power." Siegfried thanked the friendly bird and hastened into the cave. While he was gone, Mime and Alberich crept up and for the first time became aware of each other's presence. A violent quarrel at once began as to which should claim the treasure, but it was speedily silenced by the return of Siegfried clad in shining armour and bearing the helmet and ring. The two dwarfs slunk away again, unperceived by the young man, who walked thoughtfully along, listening to the wood-bird, which had recommenced its song. And these were the words of the song: "Ha! Siegfried now holds both the helmet and the ring. Beware of sly Mime, trust him not in anything." Siegfried again thanked the bird for its warning, which was indeed timely, for Mime now approached him with great pretended delight in his safety. "Have you learned what fear is?" he asked with a grin. "No, I have not," answered Siegfried. "Then sit you down and rest, bravest of men," said the dwarf. "And see, here is a cooling cup of mead I have brought for you. It will quiet you and cause you to forget your weariness." "It is poison," retorted the young man. "Thanks to the dragon's blood I can read all your wicked heart. Wretch, take your just deserts." With that he dashed the poison cup to the ground and stretched the dwarf with one blow, dead at his feet. "It was his life or mine at the last," he said, as he wended his way thoughtfully into the forest. In spite of his victory over the dragon, he was not elated. Instead, he was thinking how barren his life had been without friends or kindred, and how aimless it seemed even now, despite the gold. Sighing heavily, he sat down upon a log and buried his face in his hands. "Lonely, lonely, of all men I am most lonely!" he cried. "Would you find a love to comfort you?" sang the clear voice of the bird over his head. "I know where you can find the fairest lady in the world." "On a lofty crag she sleeps, her guard is a flaming fire, and he must bravely pierce the blaze who would win his heart's desire." Siegfried sprang to his feet. "This quest is to my liking. Tell me more about it!" he exclaimed. "The bride to win, Brunhilde to wake, is no coward's task, or to whom fear doth shake." Thus sang the woodbird again, and Siegfried listened to him joyfully. "Show me the way to the lofty crag, I pray you, good bird!" he exclaimed. "Show me the way that I may greet the lady, or look into the face of fear." By way of answer the little bird fluttered away toward the heights leading up to the mountain side. Siegfried eagerly followed, over stones, through thickets, beneath huge trees, across dangerous chasms, but always being careful not to lose sight of the bird. At last they came to a wild rocky gorge extending to the last line of cliffs, and there the bird suddenly disappeared. But Siegfried saw a narrow chasm like a giant's pathway leading upward to the crest, and this, he decided, was the route he must follow. After a last look to see where the bird had gone, he prepared to ascend the path, when he came face to face with Wotan. Siegfried had never seen the god before, and now was in no wise dismayed, although the strange-looking figure in long cloak and broad hat was larger and more commanding than any he had ever met before this day. In Wotan's hand was the spear of authority with which he ruled the world. "Where are you going?" asked the god. "I know not," replied Siegfried. "A little bird told me of a rock surrounded by fire, and of a lovely maiden who sleeps there. But now the bird is gone, and I must find my way alone." "Do you not fear the fire?" "Fear? That also have I come to seek. Know you the way?" "It lies up through yonder rift," replied Wotan, wishing to test the young man's bravery yet further. "But the journey is one of terror. Upon the mountain top the flames leap fiercely. Sheets of fire, driven before the wind, rage on every side." "The fiery foe I challenge!" answered Siegfried. "I must rescue Brunhilde at any cost!" And he strode toward the rocky chasm. "Back, rash youth!" commanded Wotan, stretching out his spear. "You shall not pass while this all-powerful weapon prevents." "It shall not prevail against this magic blade," replied Siegfried, drawing the Sword of Need. Wotan started at sight of the fateful blade. "Where got you the weapon?" he asked. "At Mime's forge I made it, the best metal in the world." "But it shall not avail against the spear, for by it was the sword first broken," answered Wotan. "Ah!" cried Siegfried, rushing forward. "Then you were my father's foe! On guard, before my sword brings vengeance upon you!" He swung the sword with terrific force through the air. It met the spear with a crash like thunder, and the once powerful spear was broken. The owner of the Ring was indeed master of the world. "Go forward," said Wotan sadly. "No longer can I hold you. The doom of the gods was foretold before you came into the world. You are but the instrument of fate." And he disappeared. Siegfried glanced at the spot where he had stood in astonishment. Then, seeing no further bar to his progress, he ran lightly up the rough pathway. Presently he heard a dull roaring sound, and saw, on the mountain height, a huge mass of flames which leaped in every direction and seemed to touch the very sky. Red and wrathful they shone, shutting off the pathway by what appeared to be a solid body of fire, while clouds of smoke hid the view on every side. But Siegfried pressed forward undaunted. Putting his hunting horn to his lips, he sounded a merry note as if in challenge. And as he went on, a wonderful thing happened. The fire parted slightly to right and left, letting him pass by unharmed. On he went until he came to the inner circle which the flame had guarded, and now it vanished utterly, leaving the blue sky and the free air of heaven. On the moss-covered rock Siegfried saw someone lying asleep beneath a heavy shield. He lifted this and beheld what appeared to be a youth clad in bright armour. The helmet hid the face, but when he carefully removed the heavy headdress, a mass of beautiful golden hair was loosened. The features were those of the lovely Brunhilde. "Ah, it is not a man!" exclaimed Siegfried, gazing at the face in rapture. "It is the maid I have come to seek. How still she is! How can I waken her from this slumber?" He tried gently to rouse her by calling, but there was no response. Only her deep breathing told him that she was alive. "'Tis the fairest vision I could ever have dreamed of seeing," he murmured. "The one maid I could worship and serve. Now I cannot waken her, and all my past hardships have been in vain." He knelt down and gazed long and rapturously into her face. Then, unable to restrain his emotions any longer, he bent and pressed his lips full and fervently upon hers. Instantly the maid awoke. While Siegfried started back in rapture, she sat up as easily as though yesterday had witnessed the beginning of her long sleep. She gazed about her in delight and burst forth into a little cry of gladness. "Hail to thee, sun! Hail to thee, light! Hail, thou luminous day! Deep was my sleep, long was the night." Then, looking about, she asked, "Who is the hero that has come to awaken me?" "I am Siegfried," he replied modestly. "Siegfried, son of Sieglinde?" she cried. "Then I knew your mother in those past years before I fell asleep." "Ah, tell me of her and of my father!" he exclaimed, his eyes shining. "But I am not thoughtful," he added in another tone. "You are in need of refreshment after your long slumber." "I am a daughter of the gods," she answered, "and feel no faintness or weariness as mortals do." Siegfried, who had come near to her, drew back as though struck by a blow. "A daughter of the gods!" he exclaimed. "I hoped to claim you for my bride." In his ingenuous youth his inner thoughts rose naturally to his lips. Brunhilde smiled sadly and shook her head. "See yonder horse which also has been asleep?" she asked. "It is Grani, my winged steed upon which I used to ride through the clouds with my sisters. Would you bid me stay upon earth?" "Ah, Brunhilde, my love is selfish, I know. But if your heart could feel half the fire that burns in mine, you would gladly stay upon earth like other women." "Like other women!" The words brought back the decree of Wotan in a flash, and Brunhilde sat as though stunned. Then she looked proudly at the fearless hero with his frank face and deep blue eyes, and as she looked the love light shining in his face was lit upon her own. Siegfried knelt and pressed his lips to her hands with bowed head. He dared not look again for very joy, and afraid lest the light he had seen should be vanished. "Brunhilde, Brunhilde!" he whispered. "Can it be true?" For answer Brunhilde clasped her arms round his neck and looked up laughingly into the sky. And again she sang, this time a note of glad renunciation. The proud War Maiden, the daughter of the gods, had found a joy in the mortal life of a loving woman, such as she had never dreamed. "Away, Valhalla, glorious world! Farewell, thou gorgeous realm of the gods! End in delight, O lofty race! Night of destruction, thy terrors are gone. I stand in the glow of Siegfried's star." Then Siegfried in his turn sang of love and Brunhilde, and the two sweet voices blended together at the last in a triumphant strain: "My own for ever and parting never, for aye and ever shining in love and smiling at death." End of Story 3. Part 1, Story 4 of Tales from Wagner by J. Walker McSpadden. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Part 1, Story 4, The Downfall of the Gods, Götterdämmerung. When Brunhilde promised to become Siegfried's wife, she well knew what it would cost her. She would no longer be of the family of the gods, nor would she have strength and wisdom beyond other mortal women. Yet she now had no regrets. Her love for her hero eclipsed every other thing, and she knew only that she was entirely happy in the present. Long the lovers sat and talked, forgetful of all the outside world. Siegfried told Brunhilde of his adventures, his fight with the dragon, his possession of the Ring, and finally his encounter with the mysterious stranger whose spear he had shattered. Brunhilde started up at this. She had recognized Wotan at once from the description. "The spear was broken, you say?" she exclaimed questioningly. "Are you sure it was broken?" "It fell shivered upon the ground beneath my sword." "What did the stranger do?" "He looked sadly at me, saying that he was powerless to hinder me further. And then he vanished suddenly." "Ah, woe to the gods!" ejaculated the maiden. "Their doom is indeed coming upon them. Siegfried, the spear you broke was the dread Spear of Authority, with which the great Wotan ruled the world. Now all the old order of things shall pass away. Valhalla itself must fall, because of the curse of the Ring." "The curse of the Ring?" asked Siegfried in an astonished voice. "What is that?" "It is the sad fate which has followed upon the heels of a bad deed," she answered. "King Wotan himself told me the tale upon that day so long ago when I disobeyed him." She shuddered slightly at the memory, then went on, "It is bound up in your own fate, so I will tell you also the story." Then Siegfried listened with wide open eyes while Brunhilde told him of the lost Rhine Gold, the building of Walhalla, the reward of the giants, the curse of the Ring. His breath was bated and his eyes were very moist when she told him further of Siegmund and Sieglinde and the wrath of Wotan. "Then you were the protector of my father and mother," he said, embracing her joyfully. "Ah, how much love and devotion do I owe you, fairest and dearest of goddess maidens!" "Will you never forget me?" she asked. By way of reply he drew the magic Ring from his finger and placed it upon hers. "Let this be our troth," he said. "From this moment it becomes a blessing instead of a curse, and our lives shall be one life for evermore." "It shall tell me always of you," answered Brunhilde, "for I know you cannot linger here, dearly as I would desire it. You come of a race of heroes, and great deeds await you upon earth. Your sword must not grow rusty in idleness, nor your strength weak through ease." "'Tis true," he said, with a sad but resolute look in his blue eyes as he glanced far over the nestling valleys. "'Tis true that my life work is yet to be begun. But alas, Brunhilde, how can I leave you? You are the only person I have ever known that gave me sympathy or love." Brunhilde pressed his hands tenderly. "My sympathy and love shall always be for you," she whispered, "and here shall I wait your return to me. Loki will build his barrier of fire about me once more, and only you, the hero who knows no fear, can find your way back again. And now take with you Grani, my good horse. He can no longer fly through the clouds as formerly when his mistress was one of the Immortals, but he will go through fire and water for you, and will be your devoted slave." The maiden called the beautiful horse, which had been aroused out of sleep at the same time as she was awakened, and which was now grazing near by. Grani came to them whinnying gently. Siegfried patted the steed's soft nose, then took the bridle slowly, as if unwilling to speak. He girded on his sword, placed his helmet firmly upon his head, and slung his bugle around his shoulders. "Farewell, beloved," said Brunhilde softly. "Farewell, beloved," he answered. "My hunting horn shall tell you from the valley all that I cannot say." One lingering embrace, and he turned and led his steed down the steep path. Brunhilde watched his descent with shining eyes. Presently from the valley below she heard the mellow notes of the horn, sweet and clear. Then the faint gallop of hoofs told her that Siegfried had gone forth into the world to play the part fate gave him. Several days passed by. Grani steadily and swiftly bore his rider over mountains, through valleys, and across rivers with untiring zeal. It was not until they reached the noble river Rhine that Siegfried drew rein. Upon the crest of a hill, across the stream from where they stood, rose a splendid castle. It seemed to belong to the king of the country, for it was very large, and a pennant floated from an upper turret. The current of the river was deep and swift at this point, but a small boat was moored not far from Siegfried. "Come, Grani," he said, dismounting. "I will take the boat while you swim alongside me across the stream. This promises an adventure." Grani obeyed, and they were soon in the channel, heading toward the castle. Now this castle was the seat of a king of an ancient and warlike tribe. His name was Gunther, and he tried to deal fairly with every man. He had a beautiful sister Gudrun, and also a half-brother named Hagen, a sly fellow who was always plotting mischief. Hagen, in fact, was the evil genius of the castle. You will not wonder at this when I tell you that he was of kin to the Nibelungs, Albric and Mime. Like all of dwarf blood, Hagen had a passion for gold, and was also adept at discovering secrets. He knew of the stolen Rhine gold, and he had also learned, perhaps through Albric, of Siegfried's quest of Brunhilde. Thereupon he began to plot, and he told King Gunther just enough of his plotting to get the monarch's interest aroused. On this very day, when Siegfried had started across the river toward the castle, Hagen had been telling the King that he ought to find a queen. And then he told of the beauty of Brunhilde, and how she slept upon a lofty cliff surrounded by a barrier of fire. "None but the bravest of heroes can rescue her," Hagen continued. "But there is one who is even now upon this quest. He is called the bravest of the brave, and his name is Siegfried." Then turning to Princess Gudrun, he added slyly, "Perchance Siegfried is the hero you have been awaiting, O Princess. He is handsome as he is brave." Now Gunther liked not the idea of another man being braver than he, but he only said, "I should like much to see the fair Brunhilde, but if I could not pierce the flame, how could I persuade Siegfried to do so in my stead, seeing this is his own quest?" "Leave that to me," laughed Hagen. "I will brew him a drink that would make him forget all his past, his plans and wishes, and he would love the first lady his eyes fall upon." He looked again slyly at Gudrun, who blushed red, but wished within her heart that she could see this Siegfried. Her wish was soon to be gratified, for just as Hagen finished speaking, they heard the sound of a horn, out on the river, blown in challenge. "Who dares challenge Gunther in his own castle?" exclaimed the King, starting up. Hagen hurried to the battlements. "I see a knight clad in glittering gold armour," he said. "He is in a boat alone, and by the boat swims a horse. With your favour I will meet him at the landing." And Hagen seized sword and helmet and hastened out. King Gunther followed him, his curiosity being aroused by the challenge and Hagen's description. Together in silence they awaited the coming of the boat, which made swift progress against the current, driven by Siegfried's muscular arms. Soon it touched the bank, and the young man sprang out. Drawing his sword, he saluted the two, and then placed himself on guard. "I am Siegfried," he said simply, "and if any man gainsay my landing on these shores, I am ready to meet him in honourable combat." "Not so," said Gunther, stretching out his hand cordially. "If your name be Siegfried, then am I right glad to welcome you. Much have I heard of your prowess, and more would I fain hear while you rest yourself at my board. I am Gunther." Siegfried looked at him frankly in the eye, then gripped his hand. Hagen also exchanged greetings with him, and led Granny away to the stables. Hagen was overjoyed at the turn affairs had taken. With his swift cunning he lost no time in putting his own schemes into play; and before he joined the King and his guest he found time to brew the drink of forgetfulness, about which he had told the King only a few minutes previously. Returning to the hall, Hagen found the King and his guest breaking bread together and chatting in a friendly way. Gunther, with true hospitality, had thrown open his home and realm to the hero. Siegfried, on his part, offered to serve the King with his sword and steed when any need should arise. "But how did you know of me, or even that I am Siegfried?" he asked bluntly. "We have already heard great things of your prowess," replied Hagen, joining in the talk, "and the magic helmet would betray you else." "The magic helmet?" repeated the young man. "Yes, the cap of darkness you have at your belt. Have you never tried its wonderful properties? By its aid you can assume any shape you choose." Siegfried had never heard of the helmet's power before. He did not attempt to conceal his surprise, but said nothing. Just then the beautiful Princess Gudrun entered the room. She bore a golden salver upon which stood a goblet. She had already beheld the hero secretly, and now willingly brought him the fatal cup of forgetfulness which Hagen had made. "Welcome to the palace of King Gunther," she said with downcast eyes. "Will my lord Siegfried drink a refreshing brew?" Siegfried thanked her courteously and placed the goblet to his lips. But though he bowed to her and the King, the toast which he whispered to himself was, "To the health of my Brunhilde! May her memory never grow dim!" But alas! no sooner had he swallowed the potion than all his past life was blotted out. He seemed like one awakened from a heavy slumber, for he rubbed his eyes and glanced wildly about him. "Where am I?" he asked, leaning upon a chair for support. "What has happened?" Then his glance fell upon Gudrun, who stood silent and ashamed of what she had done. As he looked, a flame of love was kindled in his heart for her by the power of the magic draught. "Who is this fair creature?" he asked, turning to the King. "Is she your wife?" "She is my sister," answered Gunther. "I have no wife." "It is not well for man to live alone, and all the more if he be king." "That is what my brother Hagen has told me. But the one woman I could wish to win, methinks, is not attainable." "How so?" asked Siegfried. "She is hedged about by a barrier of fire." "A barrier of fire!" said Siegfried slowly, and rubbing his eyes again. "A barrier of fire?" "She can only be reached by one who is brave enough to force his way through the flame," continued Gunther, "by one who knows no fear." "One who knows no fear?" again repeated Siegfried. "I knew such a man once." But he shook his head sadly and gave up trying to think. "Yes," added the King, "he who knows no fear can alone win Brunhilde for his bride." Siegfried made no immediate reply. The potion had done its full work, and he had utterly forgotten Brunhilde. Presently he said, "I know not the maid of whom you speak, but methinks she could not be as fair as your sweet sister." Gudrun ran hastily from the room at this. "I would be willing to go far to win her favour," he continued with the frankness of youth. "Would you be willing to aid King Gunther's wooing?" asked Hagen. "Right gladly," answered Siegfried. "But how?" "Your magic helmet would give you his appearance," replied Hagen. "That is, if you would dare face the barrier of fire." Siegfried's eyes flashed. "Dare? I dare anything, if only King Gunther and his fair sister give me their regard." The King sprang to his feet quickly. "Spoken like a man and a brother!" he exclaimed. "Upon my soul, I love you, and if you will obtain Brunhilde for me, I will undertake to win Gudrun for you." "Done!" said Siegfried, grasping his hand. "I shall go with you when you wish." Then the King ordered wine to be poured. "Come, drink a pledge with me," he said. "From this day we are brothers, and on the morrow we will set forth." Together they drank the pledge and vowed vows of eternal friendship. Meanwhile Brunhilde had grown very lonely. Although she had urged Siegfried to go out into the world and win greater fame, her heart still cried for him, and she wondered, as the days crept by, when he would return. She no longer thought of Valhalla or the War Maidens. Her whole thought was of Siegfried the Fearless. One day, as she sat and brooded, she heard the long silent cry of the War Maidens, "Ho yo to ho!" and looked up in astonishment to see one of her sisters come flying on her steed through the clouds. The next instant the two maidens were sobbing upon each other's necks in the joy of reunion. "How came you to brave Wotan's displeasure?" exclaimed Brunhilde. "Do you not know that I am cut off from you, and that you incur a great danger in coming thus to me?" "Wotan no longer cares," answered her sister. "Since his spear of authority was broken, he sits in Valhalla with moody brow. And, O my sister, that is why I have come to you. I heard him say that if you but gave up the Ring to the Rhine maidens of your own accord, the curse would be removed, and the home of the gods saved." "But I cannot give it up!" exclaimed Brunhilde, wildly pressing the Ring to her heart. "It is my betrothal ring from Siegfried, and I have promised to guard it always." "That is the only way Valhalla can be saved. Surely you can do that little thing," her sister entreated. "What care I for Valhalla?" said Brunhilde stormily. "I have so long been denied its halls that I have ceased to care. The love of Siegfried is the dearest thing I have in the world. Wotan cannot take that away from me. Go back and tell him so." "Then woe must come upon us all!" cried her sister; and seeing further entreaty was useless, she sprang hastily upon her steed and rode away. Brunhilde made no effort to stay her, but fell again into brooding silence. Presently, however, she heard the sound of a horn, and sprang eagerly to her feet. It was Siegfried's horn, and he was returning. She rushed to the edge of the rock. The flames, which had been burning fiercely, parted to right and left, as once before, and the form of a man appeared. It was indeed Siegfried, but she did not recognise him. He had put the magic helmet upon his head, and taken the form of Gunther. With Gunther's voice he also spoke to her. In a tremble she asked, "Who has dared come where only the fearless hero finds a way?" "I am Gunther the King," he answered, "and have come to claim you as my bride." "That cannot be," she answered. "I am Siegfried's promised wife." "Siegfried? You are mad. He is promised to another. Come with me." "Away! It is not true!" she cried. "This is his ring, and in its name I tell you to begone." She waved it threateningly, but he stepped forward. "If that is his ring, I must take it," he said; and before she could avoid him he seized her hand and removed the golden hoop from her finger. "Come with me," he commanded. "In the name of this bauble I tell you to obey." He had said the words in imitation of her manner, and not at all expecting her to yield so easily, for the power of the Ring also had gone from his memory. But what was his amazement to see her come forward meekly and prepare to go with him. Only as she left the rock she turned her eyes toward the sky and moaned, "Ah, Wotan, I see thy hand in this. Forgive me for having defied thee." Siegfried could make nothing of this outcry, but delighted that he should succeed in his wooing for Gunther so easily, he led her down the mountain side and bade her rest a moment by a fountain. She did so, when he went swiftly around a rock and disappeared. The real Gunther, who had awaited him there, now came forward in his stead with horses, and bade Brunhilde mount. She sadly obeyed and rode with him toward his castle, while Siegfried dashed swiftly ahead to greet Gudrun and await their coming. Hagen, meanwhile, had not been idle at the palace. He had seen Alberich, and they had plotted together as to the best means to seize the Ring, no matter who should return wearing it. Hagen had also talked with Gudrun, and easily persuaded her to accept Siegfried without delay upon his return. Siegfried, therefore, found a pleasing welcome when he presently arrived, And he had exchanged vows with the princess before the horns announced that the King was returning with his bride. Siegfried and Gudrun with Hagen met the royal party at the landing. "Welcome home, brother," said Siegfried. "I am overjoyed to see that you have been as successful in your suit as I have been in mine." Gudrun also kissed her brother. Brunhilde, however, at sight of Siegfried, started back. "Siegfried! You here? Is it true then that you are plighted to another?" "I am plighted to Gudrun," he answered calmly. Brunhilde felt a deathly faintness come over her, and came near falling to the ground. Siegfried sprang forward and supported her. "Ah, Siegfried, beloved, do you not remember me?" she asked faintly. The voice stirred strange chords within him, but he did not understand them. He quietly seated her, then turning, said, "Gunther, your bride is ill." And as the King approached, he added to her, "You have been faint. See, here comes your husband." As he pointed to the King, Brunhilde saw the fatal ring gleaming upon Siegfried's finger. "Ah, the ring!" she cried. "Siegfried's ring! My ring! Where got you it, if you are not my hero himself?" "She is excited and overcome by her journey," said Siegfried to the others. Then, as if talking to himself, he went on, "This ring? Where did I get it, I wonder? It seems to me that sometime, somewhere—I forget just where—I fought a dragon and wrested the ring from him." Siegfried knitted his brow and strove to recall the past. Hagen stepped quickly forward. "This excitement is proving too much for both our brides and bridegrooms," he said gaily. "Come, let us within, where a feast is spread in honour of the great day." The King was swift to see his suggestion. "Yes, order the trumpets to blow," he ordered. "We will rest from our journey and have public feastings." The party entered the castle, Brunhilde with the rest. She had looked once again beseechingly at Siegfried, but all his attention was bestowed upon Gudrun. At last the proud spirit of Brunhilde flashed up at what she deemed an insult. She, a daughter of the gods, to be wooed and then forsaken! She vowed revenge upon Siegfried for his rudeness. However, she gave no sign of all this. She joined the feast and sat smilingly at Gunther's side. She became his wife, while still her heart cried out for her hero, and cried in no less measure for revenge. Hagen alone knew of the struggle that was going on in Brunhilde's mind. He watched anxiously her every action, and now that he saw her smile and accept King Gunther before them all, he rubbed his hands in glee under the banquet board. He saw that his evil schemes were succeeding just as he had planned. And so, after the feast was ended, while all was laughter and music within the hall, Hagen came up and talked to Brunhilde. At first it was only idle talk and hidden flattery. Then he touched upon Siegfried. "Speak not to me of him," said Brunhilde coldly. "Why not?" asked Hagen in feigned surprise. "He is said to be the bravest hero in the world." "He may be brave, but I care not to talk of him. He is the falsest man alive." Some rash impulse made her say these words, and she regretted them as soon as spoken. But Hagen was quick to follow them up. "You amaze and alarm me," he said. "I had supposed him to be honourable. If he is false, he is a menace to our kingdom, and I for one would wish that he were out of it." "It would indeed be better if he were gone," said Brunhilde, her pride still making her utter rash things. "I am glad you have advised me of his true character," said Hagen craftily. "The King purposes to give a hunting party to morrow. Now if Siegfried should not return from it, do you think it would be better so?" "Yes," said Brunhilde indifferently, and turned to speak to the King. But if she gave no more thought to these fateful words, Hagen fairly hugged them to his heart. He saw in them a licence to do evil to Siegfried. The next day, as he had said, the King gave a hunting party in honour of the two brides. All were to meet at noonday for a repast in a grove, but were at liberty to follow that morning wherever the chase might lead. Siegfried's horse Grani soon outdistanced all the others, and led him into a deep wood. There he started a bear, but after pursuing it for some time it disappeared, and Siegfried found himself upon a wild part of the banks of the Rhine. Being thirsty and weary, he dismounted, drank at the river's brink, and threw himself down upon a mossy knoll. Just then he heard the sound of singing, a melodious but unearthly strain ending almost in a wail. Looking around, he saw 3 river nymphs rise out of the water and swim toward him. They were the Rhine maidens, but Siegfried had never seen them before. However, he was undaunted at the vision, and sought to make a jest at their expense. "Hail, fair maidens!" he exclaimed. "Some elf has led me astray, so I desire your aid. This elf was in the shape of a bear, and if he was not a friend of yours, I wish you would help me to find him." "What will you give us if we help you?" they asked. "I have nothing to give until I catch him," replied Siegfried, laughing. "What do you desire?" One of the maidens swam to him with outstretched hand. "A golden ring enwraps your finger," she said. "Give us the ring, and we will help you find the bear." "I think I slew a huge dragon to win this ring," replied Siegfried lightly. "That would be a sorry trade for me to barter it for a bear." "You are selfish," the maidens sang teasingly. "Be wise and give us the ring." They dived in and out of the water, and Siegfried laughed to watch them, secretly resolving to throw them the ring before he left them, for it had no present value in his eyes. But soon the 3 maidens swam close to the shore and lifted up their arms warningly. "Beware, Siegfried!" they exclaimed. "The ring has a curse upon it. Better give it to us." "A curse?" he asked. "That makes it interesting. I must hear about this curse." Then the Rhine maidens sang: "Siegfried, Siegfried, Siegfried, sorrow dire we foresee. If thou wardest the ring, a curse it will be. From the gold of the Rhine it was craftily wrought, then cursed by the dwarf when its magic he sought. Whoever shall own it is fated to fall. The dragon thou slewest was but one among all. To-day thou art stricken, thy doom we divine, unless thou returnest the ring to the Rhine." Siegfried heard the song through, then placed the ring tightly on his finger. "Ah, ye are trying to frighten me into giving up the trinket," he said. "But ye have sung your song to the wrong ears. I know not what fear is, and have been hunting it all my life." "Beware, Siegfried!" the maidens cried entreatingly, sinking once more into the water's depths. "Farewell!" he called after them laughingly. "I must hasten to join the hunt." The sound of a far-away horn was now heard, and he answered it with his bugle, then hastily mounted Grani and rode away. Thanks to his swift steed, he soon reached the spot agreed upon for the noontide repast. He greeted the 2 ladies, the King, Hagen, and the retainers, and seated himself between Hagen and Gudrun. Brunhilde sat directly opposite, by the King's side. As Siegfried had brought no game to the feast, it was jestingly decreed that he should entertain the company by telling some of his past adventures. Hagen passed goblets of wine to each one present, and took the opportunity to pour into Siegfried's cup a few drops of a potion which caused him to remember again some of his past. So Siegfried began to tell of his early life in the forest with Mime, of how he had harnessed the bear to frighten the dwarf, of his sword of need, and the fight with the dragon. The company applauded his story, and begged him to go on. He gladly did so, for it now seemed new and strange to him also, or as if it had been a dream. Hagen poured more of the potion into his goblet. "After I slew the dragon," continued Siegfried, "a strange thing happened. I chanced to get a drop of its blood upon my tongue, when I heard a bird singing to me, and I understood all it said. It told me of this magic ring I have on my finger, and of the Rhine gold in a cave. It also told me of a maiden on a mountain height, surrounded by a barrier of fire. Her name was Brunhilde." He sprang to his feet, rubbed his eyes, and looked across the table. "Her name was Brunhilde!" he exclaimed again, and then he stretched out his arms. Brunhilde, it was you! Oh, my beloved! Where have you been so long?" Brunhilde rose hastily, as if to reply, but before she could utter a word, Siegfried fell backward. Hagen had struck him treacherously from behind with his spear. "What have you done?" shouted the King, while Gudrun leaned her head swooningly upon her knees. "I have slain a traitor," boldly replied Hagen. "Did you not hear him admit that he had sought Brunhilde before he was wed with the Princess Gudrun, and Brunhilde herself ordered his death?" "No, no!" shrieked Brunhilde, rushing to her dying hero's side. "Ah, beloved, I see it all now! The curse of the Ring was upon us, and you knew not what you did." She lifted his head upon her lap and tried to pour wine down his throat. His eyes, which were already fast glazing, opened again at the touch of her hand. "Brunhilde," he whispered, "where have you been? I have sought you—" "Siegfried, Siegfried, forgive me! It has all been a cruel mistake. Do not die! Ah, beloved, look at me with your dear eyes again. Your kiss awakened me from a slumber of years. See, I kiss you and love you. Why do you not awaken as I did? Do not go away and leave me again. I shall not let you go." She pressed her lips wildly upon his, and the kiss stayed his soul yet a moment more. "Brunhilde, mother, we will not part." The hero who knew no fear had ended his brief earth battle. Brunhilde wept bitterly at the first outburst of grief. Then summoning all her pride and resolution, she rose and confronted Hagen. "This is your evil deed," she said. "You shall not fasten thoughtless words of mine upon it. There has been conspiracy here, and I fear that ye are all in it." "There has indeed been conspiracy," the King answered sadly, "but Hagen alone is the doer of this deed, and for it he shall answer. Our conspiracy lay only in giving Siegfried a drink of forgetfulness. We did not know he had become plighted to you, and he himself was made to forget it by the potion. He served us in all innocence." Brunhilde looked at Hagen, Gunther, and Gudrun scornfully, then turned to the retainers. "Take up the body of Siegfried," she commanded, "and bear it to the river's brink. There we will burn it upon a funeral pyre, and there will I consign this Ring of the Curse back to the Rhine maidens." They placed Siegfried upon his shield and laid the Sword of Need across his breast. Then they bore him, as she had commanded, to the bank of the river. At sunset a great funeral pyre had been erected, and the body was laid upon it. A torch was applied, and as the heap burst into flame, Brunhilde called her steed Grani and mounted him. "Hoyo to ho!" she cried, giving for the last time the call of the War Maidens. "Siegfried, beloved, I come to thee!" And straight into the fire she rode, and the flames leaping high hid her and her steed from view. But out of the midst of the pyre her voice called to the Rhine maidens, "Behold the Ring of the Curse! Come, seize it, and may gods and men be relieved of its ban!" At her cry a wondrous thing was seen by the watchers round about the pyre. A great wave rose out of the bed of the river, and on its crest the three Rhine maidens appeared. Up over the bank rushed the wave, quenching the fire as it came, and sweeping all before it into the water's depths. Suddenly Hagen gave a fearful cry. He beheld the Ring again being swept from beyond his grasp, and he plunged into the current and attempted to take it from one of the maidens, who held it exultingly aloft. But the other two twined their arms about him and dragged him down with them. When the wave had subsided he was no longer to be seen, nor was there any vestige of the funeral pyre or Brunhilde. The curse of the Ring was wiped away. Just then a reddish glow was seen in the sky. Swiftly it grew and spread like the light of many auroras. In speechless amazement the onlookers beheld this awe-inspiring sight. The doom of the gods had come with the recovery of the Ring. Walhalla was being destroyed. Wotan's kingdom was at an end. Henceforth the world was to press forward to new and better things. End of Story 4. Story 5 of Tales from Wagner by J. Walker McSpadden. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Story 5, Parsifal the Pure. Galahad, as Tennyson portrays him, will always hold the first place with English readers as the ideal knight of the Holy Grail. The matchless diction of Tennyson has given the less perfect form of the legend a supreme charm and beauty, but Wolfram von Eschenbach's Parsifal, as spiritualized and humanized in Wagner's lyric drama, will be seen to be in fuller accord with the whole cycle and development of the Grail legends, and at the same time gives the nobler story. Oliver Huckle. You have just read of the downfall of the gods through broken promises, and of a great hero of those early days who fell a victim to fate. And now you may like to hear of another hero who was even greater, for he was superior to every enemy and every temptation to the end. The old order of things had long since passed away, the gods were indeed dead, and men believed instead in one true God and in His beloved Son. A beautiful legend had grown out of the last days of the Christ upon earth, and this legend is the golden thread upon which is hung our present story. You remember that in the Bible account of the Last Supper, Christ took a cup and blessed the wine in it, and gave it to His disciples to drink. The legend goes on to relate that Joseph of Arimathea, the man who provided a tomb for Christ, obtained the blessed cup of the sacrament, and that at the crucifixion he caught in it a few drops of blood from Christ's bleeding side. Henceforth the cup possessed the magical power of healing all wounds and sicknesses. It brought perfect peace to its possessor, and the mere sight of it was esteemed the greatest privilege on earth. But it was rarely seen of men. Spirited away by divine power, the Holy Grail, as it was called, was shown only on rare occasions and to the noblest and most self-sacrificing among its seekers. And so its quest came to be the highest task a man could set himself, for it meant the conquering of his own baser nature first of all, and the putting aside of every selfish interest. You may have read the fine old story of the quest of King Arthur's Knights of the Round Table for this Holy Grail, and how it made them all nobler and better, although the inspiring vision was granted only to 2 or 3. At that time it had no fixed place, and men did not know where or how to seek it. So it is no wonder that so few ever succeeded in the quest. Finally, in another land, a brave knight, Titurel by name, decided to devote his whole life to seeking the sacred cup. Taking with him his son and a small but chosen body of knights, he set forth, trusting to the mercy of Heaven to favour his search. Many days he led his little band across deserts, through valleys, and over stony mountain-sides. And as they went, they aided every person who crossed their path. They forsook all worldly pride, and they spoke only in kindness and humility of spirit. Night and morning also they prayed that they might be led to the Holy Grail. On and on they went, dusty and travel-worn and weary, but with the same brave hearts. Late one evening they stopped for the night in the shelter of a dense forest. They had travelled all day and had eaten little, but after resting a brief while something seemed to urge them forward. "Rise, my brave knights," said Titurel, standing stiffly upon his feet. "Rise, and let us go still farther into the wood. I feel that it is the divine will." Without murmuring, they once more resumed their march, and, wonderful to relate, the farther they went, the less tired they grew. A strange feeling of rest and content came over them, until in a great wave of joy they all fell upon their knees and gave thanks. They felt that at last they were nearing the Holy Grail. As they knelt, a great light, like noonday, shone round about them, and a voice said, "Arise, ye blessed among mankind, for your labours are rewarded, and it is given to you to guard the Holy Grail. Near unto you is a mountain which shall be called Mount Salvat, and thereupon must ye build a temple, and ye shall be called the Knights of the Holy Grail." The voice ceased. The knights fell upon their faces in prayer and thanksgiving. When they arose, the light had disappeared, but in each face was reflected a lofty purpose born of its glory. The next morning they went their way to Mount Salvat, and there built the temple. High were its walls, with lofty arches and beautiful windows, and its fame as the most imposing temple in all the world soon went abroad. And when it was finished, and they held the solemn service of dedication, a light came and glowed steadily in the crypt. While all the knights fell upon their knees, Titurel drew near and lifted a veil. There, in all its beauty, shone the Holy Grail. Then Titurel and the knights were filled with great joy, and they vowed eternal service to the sacred charge. They became indeed a sort of priesthood, and forsook all other aims or desires. Daily they worshipped in the temple, and were fed from the holy altar. And if any among them became wounded or ill, the mystic fire which glowed about the cup speedily restored them to health. For many years they kept their charge with zealous faith. Titurel, their head, became an old man, and Amfortas, his son, was appointed chief guardian of the Grail in his stead. Meanwhile, as you may suppose, many other knights were desirous of being admitted into the temple, but none save those who led pure and sincere lives were ever accepted. Among those who were rejected because they were unworthy was a powerful magician named Klingsor. When he failed to win entrance in the usual way, he tried to bribe the keepers of the gates and to make use of other base methods, but without success. In his rage Klingsor swore vengeance, and devoted all his wicked arts to overthrowing the Temple of the Grail. He made a beautiful garden on the other side of the mountain, which he filled with flowers, fruits, music, and dancing girls. By this means he deluded many knights who had come from afar earnestly seeking the Holy Grail, so that, almost at the goal, they forgot their quest and tarried idly in the gardens. Hearing of Klingsor's wicked arts, Amfortas was filled with righteous anger. He determined to go forth and strike down the magician with the sacred spear, which was his high badge of office. This spear was second only to the Grail itself in value. It was the same that had pierced the Saviour's side while he was on the cross. It gave to its bearer the power of overcoming all his enemies, so long as he was true to the faith. But Amfortas, though zealous, was too confident of his own strength. Going over the mountain hastily in search of Klingsor, he grew tired and thirsty, so when he came to a shady grove of fruit trees by a splashing fountain, he did not recognize this as one of the wiles of the magician, but ate and drank, then threw himself down on the cool grass and fell asleep. The spear was loosened from his grasp in his slumber, and he was only awakened by a keen, smarting pain in his side. He found that he had been wounded, and as he sprang to his feet, he confronted Klingsor, who was waving aloft the spear in triumph. "Go back to your temple," sneered Klingsor, "and bid the next man be not weary so soon." In shame and sorrow Amfortas departed, knowing that he had sinned and could do nothing against the spear now in the hands of the enemy. Earnestly he did penance in the temple, and confessed his fault, but the wound in his side never healed. It gave him daily torment, and the sight of the Grail, which had once brought healing, seemed only to increase the pain. It had been Amfortas' duty to uncover the Grail each day at sacrament, but so dire was his suffering that he came to do it less and less frequently. The knights were very sorrowful because of these things, and they sent far and wide for healing balsams, but all remedies were powerless. Long did Amfortas kneel before the altar, praying in his pain, and seeking for a word of hope from above. At length, one day, an added radiance glowed about the Grail, and he heard a voice saying, "By pity enlightened, my guileless one, wait thou for him till my will is done." Amfortas could not understand these words, but somehow his heart was lightened, and he thanked God that one day, be it near or far, he should find relief. The other Knights of the Grail also heard with joy of the strange message, for they did not doubt that it meant healing and peace. For many days they waited patiently and prayerfully, without receiving any further sign. Amfortas strove to sustain his courage, but it was a bitter test. Daily he tried the baths and also the balms which his knights often went to much peril to obtain for him, yet the wound still showed no signs of healing, and deep gloom settled down over the temple. One day, while the aged keeper of the gate was sitting, as was his wont, with his face toward the little lake which nestled in the valley, his eye was attracted by a wild swan which soared peacefully above the lake. Suddenly it turned sideways, with a wild flutter of pinions, and began to fall toward the water. The keeper saw that it was wounded by an arrow, and he hastened down to the lake to see who had done the deed, for it was forbidden to harm any creature, great or small, within sight of the temple. Just as he reached the bank, the swan fell at his feet and expired, while at the same moment a youth ran up to claim his prize. He was clothed in motley animal skins, but he was strong and well knit, and with that frank look about the eye which denotes both fearlessness and innocence. "Shame, shame upon you, boy, for shooting the swan!" said the old man sternly. "Why, what have I done?" answered the youth. "Do not men hunt birds and beasts? Methought it was a fine thing that I struck the bird so high." "But you are now within holy ground, where 'tis sacrilege to harm any creature. And think what sorrow you have brought with your idle deed. This beautiful bird will soar in the clouds no more. It may have a mate, or perhaps little ones awaiting its coming. They will never see it again." The boy stood with downcast eyes and troubled face. "Indeed, I never thought evil," he said, and seized by a sudden impulse he broke his bow across his knee and flung his arrows away. "What is your name, boy?" asked the knight. "I am Parsifal," he answered simply. "Whence come you?" "I do not know." "Where go you?" "I go to become a knight," answered the boy. "I have always wanted to be a knight." "But do you not know that great things are expected of a knight? They must do other deeds than roaming about shooting harmless swans." The boy flushed, but looked straight at the stern old man. "I know that a man must be brave and true," he said, "and that he must keep his heart pure. My father, who died long ago, was just such a knight, and my mother has always taught me to be like him." "But you will have many strong trials before you can become a knight. You may have to wander all over the world and endure many hardships." "I am ready for them," answered the boy sturdily. "Truly you are a guileless fellow," said the old keeper, "but I like your spirit. Would you like to witness a service in the temple and hear the choir boy sing? Perchance you would like to be a choir boy for a while?" "Nay, but I came to be a knight. Nathless I will hear the singing." The boy said this so calmly that the knight was half sorry he had given the invitation, for chances to obtain entrance to the service were exceedingly rare. However, the word had been spoken, and he would abide by it. They cast the dead swan into the lake and went together up the hill. Service of the sacrament was just being begun in the temple as they entered its doors. High up in the organ loft the rolling waves of music poured forth, filling every arch of the lofty building. Then the sweet voices of boys were heard chanting the refrain to which Amfortas had set music: "By pity enlightened, my guileless one, wait thou for him till my will is done." Parsifal plucked the old knight's sleeve. "What do they mean by that?" he asked. "Hush! I do not know," replied the knight. Parsifal thought it strange that they should sing words no one understood, but he kept silence and looked upon the solemn service with wide-open eyes. The aged Titurel was present at the service. His days were almost numbered now, but he still had his couch conveyed into the presence of the beloved Grail when he felt strong enough. To-day he joined the other knights in urging his son Amfortas to uncover the cup and serve the sacrament. "Let me have the sacrament from out the blessed cup once more before I die," said Titurel. Amfortas shook his head and groaned aloud. "Not yet, my father. I am unworthy to uncover the Grail." Nevertheless the feeble Titurel urged the point, and all the knights knelt with solemn upturned faces, until at last Amfortas went and unveiled the cup and poured wine therefrom, so that all might partake. Then he fell to the floor with a shudder of pain. The old wound had broken open afresh. But Titurel and the other knights partook of the sacrament, while the choir boys chanted responsively, and the deep organ pipes thrilled all the lofty arches. The old keeper of the gate went forward and partook with the rest, while the boy Parsifal stood spellbound behind a pillar, and could make no meaning of what he saw. At last the keeper came and led him forth again to the open air, and then the lad's tongue was loosed. "I pray thee, why did the King fall to the floor as if in pain?" he asked. "The wound in his side pained him," answered the keeper. "Why doesn't it heal?" "That is a long story. But the wound was made by the sacred spear, and 'tis said that only the touch of that spear again can make it well." "Then why does he not go and lay hold of the spear?" "It is in a powerful magician's hands." "Can no one take it from him?" "No one has yet succeeded in the quest," answered the knight. "But, boy, how did you like the service of the Holy Grail?" "I could make nothing of it," said Parsifal, turning as if to go. "Could make nothing of it!" exclaimed the old knight. "Truly you would not be much of a choir boy. But where are you going?" "I go to seek the spear that will heal the King," answered Parsifal. The old knight let him go without further words. He even shook his head in some impatience. "Truly a guileless youth," he said to himself. "A little knocking about in the world will not hurt him. He is too foolish to do us any good here. And as to being a knight, pish!" But just then the closing words of the service came echoing through the windows, and caused the old man to start. He heard again the mystic song, "By pity enlightened, my guileless one." Now Klingsor the magician had cast a spell over a poor woman, so that she was obliged to obey him in all things. Usually she was old and wrinkled, and passed for a witch in the countryside. But when Klingsor waved his wand over her, she became the most beautiful maiden ever seen. Kundry was her name, and she it was who had charge of the groves and flowers and music and dancing girls, which had caused so many knights to turn aside before ever they reached the Temple of the Grail. Kundry indeed had caused Amfortas himself to sin, on the day he lost the sacred spear. But when the spell was removed from poor Kundry, she always bitterly repented her misdeeds. She had been very sorry for Amfortas, in her wild way, and had herself brought balsam from distant lands to heal his wound, but without avail. No sooner was Parsifal on his way in search of the sacred spear than Klingsor was on the alert. Once more he summoned Kundry and bade her prepare the same kind of a trap for Parsifal as had lured the knights aside. But Kundry hotly protested at this. She had seen the youth and greatly liked his open face and frankness. She rebelled against doing harm to one so harmless as he. "Let him pass on his way," she pleaded. "He has done no evil, and is too simple to find you unaided. And even if he did, he could not take the spear from you." "Do as I bid you," replied the magician angrily. "It is precisely because he is pure and innocent that I fear him. Such an one's coming has long been foretold." So Kundry had nothing to do but sadly obey. When Parsifal drew near, walking over the crest of the hill, the palace of Klingsor suddenly sank into the earth and vanished, leaving in its stead a lovely flower garden. Presently Parsifal stopped and listened, for he heard strains of music. "How sweet it sounds!" he said. "Yet it seems to make the air heavy and uncomfortable. I wonder where it comes from." Louder grew the music, and with it came the sound of girls' voices. Just then he came to the entrance of the garden, where he paused spellbound. The flowers themselves were singing to him. Each flower was in the lovely tints of a rose, lily, pansy, or carnation, and out of the centre of each blossom peeped the bright eyes and laughing face of a bewitching maiden. "Come," they sang to him, "come and rest by the fountains. Come, drink nectar, and let us sing to you while you rest in the shade." "Nay," said Parsifal simply. "I like you all, and would gladly listen to your song, but I cannot tarry, for I am on an urgent errand." "Come," they pleaded, and the flowers seemed to weave in and out in a wonderful dance, nodding to him and beckoning him. "Come, only a little while. Then you will start forth rested and make better speed." Parsifal shook his head. "I cannot enter," he said, and turned to go, when another voice, softer than the rest, called his name. "Who called me?" he asked, turning about. "I called thee, lad," said the sweet voice. He looked whence it came, and saw a leafy bower opened wide, and in it sat a maiden fairer than ever heart could dream. It was Kundry, the ugly old witch, transformed by the power of the magician into this glorious vision. "How did you know my name?" he asked bluntly. "I knew thy mother, lad, and thy father too. Wouldst hear of them?" "Oh, yes, yes!" he cried eagerly. "Tell me of them." "Then come within the bower and rest awhile. Here thou canst listen to the music, and eat and drink and dance with these lovely flowers." "Nay, but tell me now. Why should I pause when I am not faint? No good deed was ever done by stopping on the way." "Thou art a foolish youth," said the maiden. "Why art thou in so great haste?" "I seek a magician," he answered frankly, "a magician who has stolen the sacred Spear." "Ah, I can tell thee of him!" she cried, an evil light lurking in her eyes. "Come, sit by my side, and I will tell not only of him, but of thy father and mother." Parsifal turned at this, but entered the garden slowly. He knew no reason why he should not come in, and yet a great force seemed holding him back. "But how can I go on my errand," he thought, "unless I find the way?" "I would rather hear about my mother first," he said, seating himself by the maiden's side. "Is she well?" "She is well, but has mourned sadly since thou didst go away. I saw her only a few days ago, and she sent thee her love and a kiss." Here the witch leaned forward suddenly and printed a kiss upon his lips. It was intended to enchant him, but for once it failed of its effect. Parsifal sprang up as if stung by an asp. "Amfortas! Oh, Amfortas!" he cried. "I know it now! The spear wound in your side! Ah, the anguish of it has come upon me also!" "Thou art wrong," said the woman softly. "I have harmed thee not. Only stay." "Not another moment!" exclaimed Parsifal. "Your garden is evil and brings death to men's souls." He turned to go, but the witch called aloud to the magician, for she knew her power was gone. And as she called, Parsifal saw a dark, dreadful figure before him that blocked his way. "Stay!" commanded Klingsor, waving the sacred Spear aloft. "Those who enter my garden cannot leave it so easily." "Stand aside!" cried Parsifal. "I have done no hurt, and I fear you not." "Thou wilt fear me when thou dost feel this spear point. 'Tis the same that undid Amfortas." "Ah, say you so? Then I have come to claim it in his name." "Take it!" shouted the magician angrily, and he threw the weapon straight at Parsifal with terrific force. But, miracle of miracles! It stopped of itself midway, and floated gently round about Parsifal's head. He grasped it reverently, and made the sign of the cross. "In this sign, perish!" he exclaimed. "Let all your wicked magic vanish from the face of the earth." As he uttered these words a tremendous crash was heard, followed by an earthquake. The garden, its flowers and music and running streams were swallowed up in an instant, with all its inmates. Parsifal alone remained on solid ground. He looked about him, but could see only a trackless forest with close spreading trees that shut out the blue sky and the light of the sun. He did not know which way to turn, or where stood the Temple of the Grail. But the sacred Spear was still in his hand, and its presence seemed to bring comfort. He knelt and prayed for guidance, and as if in answer, the words of the old knight came into his memory. "You may have to wander all over the world and endure many hardships." The young Parsifal wondered at this message. It seemed to come in answer to his prayer, and yet his spirit rose in questioning. "Why should I roam over the world when the King needs me so much, and his wound is not healed?" But no other answer came, and no path led out of the forest. So he made no further questions, but went his way, trusting to Heaven to guide him, and the sacred Spear to protect him. When at last he reached the borders of the wood, he found himself in a strange country. Thus it was that Parsifal began his pilgrimage. Long and hard it was, yet he did not falter or complain, and always his hand was ready to help the poor or the suffering, while little children came to him gladly, knowing they had found a friend. Often his path led over steep, rough mountains. Again it lay in burning sands of the desert, and again it was close to treacherous quicksands or yawning pits. But steadily he pressed forward, learning many things as he went, but never parting from any of his early purity or courage. Slowly also the great truth of the Holy Grail dawned upon him. He heard men speak of it with reverence and longing as the dearest treasure the earth possessed. Then he realized how lightly he had thrown away his own privilege through ignorance, and why the old knight at the gate had turned from him with impatience as guileless. With humility and prayer he resolved that he would always try to be worthy of this vision, in the hope that it would again come to him. And in moments like this, when his whole soul was stirred with anguish, he seemed to hear an inner voice saying, "Courage! The Holy Grail is not far away." Thus years passed by, and at last Parsifal, for true and heroic service, was made a knight. Never was there a comelier. Strong and straight and graceful he stood, while his face was fair and pleasing and seemed continually to glow with an inner light. His eye was the very mirror of truth. He was indeed the image of that ancient ideal, a knight without fear and without reproach. And always he sought the deed that was most valorous and the duty that was most severe, hoping that his steps might be directed again to the Temple of the Grail. One night he heard the bleating of a lamb that had lost its way. Parsifal was far from shelter, and the night was stormy, yet he did not hesitate. He turned aside and sought in the darkness until he had found the little wanderer, when he wrapped it in his cloak and carried it to its mother. When he again sought his road he could not find it because of the storm. He wandered on, and presently saw that he was in the midst of a dense forest. Somehow even in the night it seemed familiar to him, and his heart gave a great leap. He felt that the Holy Grail was close at hand. Then a flash of lightning disclosed to him a little cavern, hollowed out of a rock, and he entered it for shelter during the night with thankfulness. The next morning the sun shone bright and warm, gilding the wet leaves of the forest with radiance. Parsifal followed a shining beam of gold straight through the forest, and there before his feet lay the lake where he had shot the swan so long ago. On the hill near by stood the Temple of the Grail. Parsifal stuck the spear upright in the soil, and knelt in prayer and rejoicing that his long pilgrimage was at an end; then rose and took his steps toward the hill. "I wonder if the old knight of the gates is still alive," he said to himself. "I should dearly like to see him again." No sooner had he said this than he saw an aged man tottering feebly along, and lo! it was the keeper himself. By his side walked a woman whom Parsifal seemed to remember, but could not quite. It was Kundry, the former witch of the flower garden. After this garden was destroyed she had been released from the magician's spell, and she was now carrying water and doing other menial tasks around the temple, in the hope of atoning for her past wickedness. When the keeper saw the knight in splendid armour standing there motionless, he greeted him courteously and said, "Good morrow, Sir Knight! Do you come seeking the Temple of the Grail? Then know that you are even now on consecrated ground, where it is forbidden to come bearing arms, or with helmet closed." For answer Parsifal once more thrust his spear into the earth, and laying aside his helmet, knelt with his face toward the temple. Then the old knight remembered him. "It is the youth of the swan!" he exclaimed to Kundry. "And see what he has brought back with him, the sacred spear! O happy day on which the spear comes home!" Then Parsifal rose to his feet, and seeing love and joy in the old man's face, he opened his arms, and the two embraced right gladly. "All hail to thee, good friend!" cried Parsifal. "Long did I fear that I should never see thy face again." "Dost thou remember me?" asked the keeper. "Long years have passed, and much grief has bent my back, since the day I let thee go forth as guileless and crack-brained." "As indeed I was," answered Parsifal. "But through failures and hardships and many trials, the guileless one has been at last enlightened, even as they sang in that strange, sweet song of the temple." "But tell me," the young man continued, "is there not something changed about this holy place? Oft have I heard about it in my wanderings. Men told me that Mount Salvat was the abode of delight, that here the birds sang, the knights went hither and thither with joy upon their faces, and the very air was filled with the springtime of gladness. Is it not so, or is this only an idle dream?" "It was so," answered the old man sadly, "but dark days have come upon Mount Salvat. For pain of his wound, Amfortas has ceased entirely to serve the sacrament from the sacred cup, and therefore are all the knights sad in their hearts. They have betaken themselves to cells like monks. The aged Tinterel has died because he could no longer behold the Grail, and I am only living on in penance, waiting till I can join him." "Nay, but all these things must not be," said Parsifal. "Dost thou remember telling me long ago that the sacred Spear, this Spear, would heal Amfortas of his wound? I set forth to seek it that very day. Come, let us take it into his presence." "Pray God the oracle may come true!" exclaimed the keeper joyfully. "And thou dost come at a good season, for it is the Good Friday service to day, and Amfortas has promised to uncover the Holy Grail once again, be the cost what it may. But before we go up, thou must rest and be cleansed at this spring, and I will procure a white robe for thee." So Parsifal laved his face and his hands in the spring, while the old man went in haste for the white robe. And while he sat there, the woman came up timidly and knelt down and unfastened his sandals and washed his feet. Then Parsifal looked down and remembered her. "Thou art Kundry," he said. "Thou hast come a long hard way, even as I have come." He sprinkled her brow with a few drops of water from the spring. "I baptize thee into a new life," he said. "Come with us this day to the temple." The tears rained down glad Kundry's face, and as she knelt there it was transformed again into the loveliness of the maiden of the flower garden, but purer, sweeter, and of a radiance not of earth. She was redeemed. Just then the soft chimes of the temple bells rang forth, bidding them come to the service. The keeper returned with a garment which he put upon Parsifal, and the three went up the path to the gates, Parsifal in the centre bearing the sacred Spear. They had no sooner entered than the procession of knights filed by, preceded by the choir boys who sang of the Holy Grail. Last of all came Amfortas, slowly and as if in great pain. He paused before the shrine and made as if to open it, while all the knights gathered about in reverent waiting. Suddenly he paused, clasped his hands to his side, and cried out, "No, no! I cannot do it! Death is so near me, only let me die! Slay me with your swords, and choose another guardian of the Grail. I cannot bear to unveil the holy cup. Kill me, I pray you!" His brow was wet with agony, and he writhed with pain so that the knights drew back from him in terror. Just then Parsifal drew near in his flowing white robe, bearing the Spear aloft. "Peace, O Amfortas!" he said quietly. "Only one weapon will ease thee of that pain. It is the one that caused it." And with the sacred Spear he touched the wound, and lo! it was healed in an instant, and Amfortas' agony was changed to rapture as he knelt before the altar. "Thou art forgiven," Parsifal's voice went on, "forgiven to continue in thy service of the Grail. But nevermore shalt thou be its guardian. The words of the oracle have come true. By pity enlightened, my guileless one, wait thou for him till my will is done." Then Parsifal went reverently to the shrine and uncovered it, while all the knights knelt on their knees and prayed, and the ransomed Kundry fell prostrate and bathed the altar steps with her happy tears. He drew forth the Holy Grail and held it aloft, and instantly a ray of dazzling light fell from above and struck within the cup, so that it glowed with glory which flooded all the temple. And down from the lofty dome fluttered a pure white dove, which hovered lightly over his head. The knights saw and understood the sign. A new guardian of the Grail was come to them. The temple had awakened to a higher service through the stainless life of Parsifal. Let us leave them there in that holy service before Easter, while the music rose and swelled triumphant, telling the victory over sin and death. End of Story 5. Story 6 of Tales from Wagner by J. Walker McSpadden. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Story 6, Lohengrin the Swan Knight. Hear ye, the King has come to Antwerp, who fights upon the King's side. The silvery blast of a trumpet rang out, following the clear tones of a herald's voice, and in answer a great shout arose from a multitude of throats, for all the people in this wide-stretching plain were eager to follow the standard of their warlike ruler. It was in the days not long after Parsifal had come to the Temple of the Grail. The kingdom of Germany, so long a prey to warring states, had found a strong head in Henry the Fowler, who protected the land from foes within and without. In times of peace it was his custom to travel from city to city holding court and listening to the grievance of everyone, great or small. In wartime he levied troops and led them in person. His visit to Antwerp on this occasion was for both purposes, as the Hungarians had lately declared war against him and were threatening to invade Germany. Antwerp was a capital of the ancient dukedom of Brabant, and one of King Henry's chief cities. On his coming, therefore, he was greatly troubled to find the state rent with quarrels and secret discontent. The King held his court in the open air under the spreading branches of a stately tree called the Oak of Justice, which stood on the bank of the winding river Scheldt. Here all the people gathered to pay him homage, and here, on the bright spring morning when our story opens, he caused the herald in brilliant livery to stand forth and blow upon a trumpet. "Hear ye!" cried the herald again. "The King has come, who fights for the King!" Then all the people answered as with one voice, and came and knelt before the throne in token of allegiance. The King's eye gladdened at the sight. "Verily," he said, "with such stout arms and loving hearts as these we will drive the enemy into the sea." After he had greeted many by name, and many others had been presented to him, he saw one noble who had fought with him against the Danes. "Come hither, Frederick of Telramund," he commanded. "As an oft-tried friend I have a question to ask of you. How is it that Brabant has no head, but is rent with inner quarrels?" Frederick of Telramund stepped forward and bowed low. He was a tall man with beetling brows and deep piercing eyes. "I am thankful, my King," he began in a heavy voice and with ill-concealed excitement, "that you have seen our troubles, and will lend ear to the story of them. I will tell you the truth. The former Duke of Brabant was my friend, and when he died he chose me as guardian for his children, Godfrey and Elsa. I brought them up as carefully as though they were my own, and looked forward fondly to the time when Godfrey should be Duke. Also, shall I confess it, when I might win Elsa for my wife. But all these hopes were destined to fail. Elsa was a proud girl, and I fear now that she coveted the dukedom for herself, though she pretended to have great love for her brother. One day they went roaming in the woods and by the river's brink, as they often did. When night came, Elsa returned without her brother. She was pale and trembling, and when we asked her where he had gone, she would only reply by wringing her hands and sobbing. That is all the answer we have got from her from that day to this, and we cannot help fearing that she drowned him, or laid other violent hands upon him. Of course, after this happening I could no longer choose her hand in marriage, but I chose instead a lady whom I now wish to present to you, Ortrud, daughter of the brave King Radbod. In former times he was king over all this land, and in my wife's name I lay claim to Brabant." As he finished speaking, Frederick took his wife by the hand and led her forward. She was a very handsome woman, though almost of masculine type, and her eye had a watchful look like that of a crouching tigress. She bent her head with the grace of a queen. The King knitted his brow at the story, and looked about as though seeking someone else whom he might question. Seeing his doubt, Frederick resolved upon a bold stroke. Turning, he addressed the people in a loud voice, saying, "I accuse Elsa of Brabant of the murder of her brother. If there be any here who can deny my charge, I challenge him to come forth." No one moved, although there were mutterings here and there, and sullen shakings of the head. The King rose suddenly and hung his shield upon a limb of the tree. "This is the oak of justice," he said, "and I promise ye that I will not depart from its shade this day until I have made trial of this charge. This shield no longer shall I wear, till judgment is pronounced, I swear." At a signal the herald came forward again and announced, "Now shall this cause be tried as ancient law demands." Then he blew a loud blast upon his trumpet, and called upon Elsa of Brabant to come before her King for judgment. The people had received the announcement that the King would try the cause, with breathless eagerness. Now they parted to right and left, and looked intently along the path Elsa was expected to come. They were not disappointed. After a few moments a train of ladies appeared, walking slowly, two by two, toward the Oak of Justice. Among them was one dressed in pure white. Her head was uncovered, and her golden hair fell in soft curls about her shoulders. Her blue eyes had a far-away look in them, and her pale face was marked by lines that told of suffering. The Lady Ortrud looked balefully at her as she came forward, but the people drew nearer to the maiden with marks of pity that showed their old love of her. The King himself was struck by this fair vision. The set look came out of his eyes, and he leaned forward and gently took her by the hand. "Are you Elsa of Brabant?" he asked. The young girl bowed and wrung her hands in silence. "You are accused of the murder of your brother," continued the King. "What have you to say?" "Oh, my poor brother!" cried Elsa, and not another word would she answer to the charge. "Speak!" said the King. "Do you not know that I must adjudge you guilty unless you confide in me?" Elsa looked up at the King and seemed to gain courage. The people gazed on the scene with stillness as of death. Elsa's voice was low but clear, and its tones were distinctly heard. "When I have been in deep trouble," she said, "I have prayed to Heaven for help. It has been many times of late, oh, many, many times. At last I was answered. I have had a dream, and it is such a beautiful dream that I know it must come true. A knight in glittering armour appeared in a vision and promised to be my champion whenever I should call upon him. O King, I claim him for my champion to-day. He will prove my innocence." Her words answered nothing and proved nothing, yet such was her manner that the people believed in her and shouted aloud that she was guiltless. The King himself seemed to seek a pretext to let her go free, but Frederick of Telramund stepped boldly forward. "A likely story this, your Majesty!" he sneered. "Dream knights never yet have done anything, and if the Lady Elsa can but find her champion upon earth, here I stand ready to fight him to decide this cause." The King looked at the maiden anxiously, and her face lit up at once. "I agree to these terms," she said. Upon this the King gave orders that lists or open spaces should be cleared, and then he announced that, following ancient custom, they would rest the issue of Elsa's guilt or innocence upon single combat between champions. The herald once again came forward and blew a long blast upon his trumpet and proclaimed, "Let him stand forth by Heaven's right, who would for Elsa's just cause fight." There was a painful silence, while Frederick and Ortrud looked in smiling disdain upon the poor girl. "Oh, my King!" she cried. "Summon him again! His home is far away, and he may not have heard." "Sound once again!" commanded the King, and again the trumpet call rang out. Again there was intense silence. Elsa dropped upon her knees and prayed until it seemed as though her very soul would burst with emotion. Suddenly a man nearest the bank of the river startled the silence with a cry. "A swan! A swan! And in its wake a boat bearing a knight!" Every eye turned and gazed up the winding stream, and there sure enough was a beautiful white bird swimming easily and gracefully along and drawing a little boat with a knight in it. "A miracle! A miracle!" shouted the people. As he drew near they saw that the knight was clad in silver armour, which shone dazzling white in the sun. Amid a general hush the swan drew the boat to shore, and the knight stepped out. Before greeting the King or court he dismissed the swan in a tender little song of farewell. "I give thee thanks, my faithful swan. Turn thee again and stem the tide. Go back to that blest land of dawn, where thou and I did once abide. Full well thy loving task is done. Farewell, farewell, beloved swan, my faithful swan." Then, while the swan bent its head in sad obedience and sailed away on the current, the knight turned to the King. "Hail, O King!" he said courteously. "I have come in answer to your summons to do battle in Elsa's cause." "You are right welcome, noble knight, from wheresoever you come," answered the King. Then turning to Elsa he continued, "Do you accept this knight to be your champion?" "'Tis the knight of my dream!" she murmured, sinking at his feet. The King struck his shield 3 times with his sword. "Sound the call to combat!" he commanded. The call was given, and Frederick of Telramund took his place sullenly in the lists. He liked not the turn affairs were taking, but his word was given and could not be withdrawn. The stranger knight lifted Elsa gently to her feet, then prepared to face his enemy. Another stroke upon the King's shield, and the 2 antagonists had crossed blades with a sharp crash. But not long did they fight. Frederick was clearly outclassed from the first, and after a few wild furious blows, which the other lightly parried, his sword was sent flying from his hand, and he was compelled to yield to the mercy of his conqueror. The Knight of the Swan refused to take his life, but according to the law the defeated man was accounted a perjurer, and doomed to exile. With downcast head he slunk away, followed by the proud Ortrud, who glared about defiantly to the last. But the victorious knight now heeded them not. He had turned to where Elsa stood, and held out his hands in the old gesture which every maiden must one day understand. With a glad cry she ran and nestled in his arms. "My hero!" she whispered. Then the knight turned proudly toward the King, and said in the hearing of all, "I would have the Lady Elsa as my wife." "You have my consent with hers," replied King Henry heartily, "and with her hand goes the dukedom of Brabant." At this all the people shouted and threw their caps high in the air, for the new duke presented a handsome figure, while they had never liked the usurping Frederick. "Only one promise must I exact from the fair Elsa," continued the champion. "If she cannot give it, I must release her from her silent pledge." "What is that?" asked the King. "She must never ask me my name, or whence I come. That I am well born and worthy of her she can decide for herself, but no question must be asked as to my past life. Can you promise this, my Elsa?" He looked down anxiously at her, and she met his gaze frankly and trustingly. "I promise, my husband," she answered in low, sweet tones. The Knight of the Swan kissed her upon the brow, while the King himself came forward and took each by the hand. "I shall take this maiden in my charge," said Henry the Fowler, "and remain in Antwerp long enough to bestow her in marriage upon this man. Come, let us to the palace and prepare for the ringing of the joy bells." Then once again the people shouted with delight and came crowding up to share in the scene. The King's shield was seized from the limb where it hung, and Elsa was placed upon it and borne forth in triumph, while the Swan Knight was likewise carried upon his own shield. To have heard the noise and rejoicing, you would have thought that there was no one in all Brabant who did not share in the general happiness. But there were two who found it gall and wormwood, and these two were Frederick and Ortrud. Deprived of their wealth and power, and in danger of their lives, they suffered a just punishment for their wickedness. Frederick was for leaving Brabant at once, and seeking their fortune in other countries. But Ortrud, whose spirit remained unbroken, would not hear of this. All along she had been his evil counsellor, and now she set going other schemes of mischief. The two stole forth at nightfall, clothed in beggars' tattered garments, and made their way to the palace steps, where they listened to the sounds of rejoicing within the palace. "Ah, I should still be there if I had not listened to you," groaned Frederick, who was a man of poor courage. "Cease your complaining," answered Ortrud. "We will win the victory yet, and you shall be in power again, if you listen to me now." "What can we do?" "Have you not heard of the promise made by Elsa to this Swan Knight? He is a magician, I warrant you, and all we need do is to prove it. She has promised never to ask his name. Now, if we can get her to break that promise, he will vanish. Mark my words." Frederick sat up and looked around eagerly. "Ortrud, you are a genius," he said. "But how can we do this? We are beggared and exiled." "Trust me. But hush! I hear someone on the balcony." It was Elsa herself who came out for a moment to look at the stars and commune with her own great happiness. At sight of the girl's face in the glow of the window, Ortrud crept softly round the balustrade, and suddenly appeared before her startled gaze. "Pardon! Pardon!" cried the crafty woman in a low tone, and sinking on the step at Elsa's feet. "Who are you?" demanded Elsa. "I am an outcast. Out of your great happiness, pity my deep misery." "It is Ortrud!" exclaimed the girl, her heart made tender by her own love. "Poor woman, I did not seek to harm you. Your husband brought it on himself." "I had naught to say," coaxed the kneeling woman. "And now you would not send me forth from your door, to wander into the wide world a beggar." "No," exclaimed the generous Elsa. "I will shelter and protect you. Come with me." She turned to order lights from two servants at the door, and Ortrud shot a quick glance of cunning triumph at her hidden husband before entering the palace. All that night Frederick lurked amid the shadows of the neighbouring cathedral and waited. He knew that their wicked schemes were in safe hands, with Ortrud on the inside; and although only a few short hours remained, he took heart of hope. The wedding had been set for early the next morning, so that Henry the Fowler could go to the wars. Hardly had the sun struck the lowest range of windows on the building before an army of servants appeared as if by magic, and began decorating walls, porticos, and pillars with streamers and flowers. When the sunlight had penetrated every corner of the court, a herald came out and announced the approaching wedding. The King's business demanded haste, and so there had been no delay. The herald further announced that the stranger knight would not accept the dukedom, but would be styled simply the Protector of Brabant, and that he was to go with the King's troops and lead the men into battle against the Hungarians. The herald had scarcely ceased ere 4 pages appeared on the palace steps, crying, "Make way for the Lady Elsa!" Again the ladies in waiting came forth, clad in white, and behind them came Elsa, looking very lovely in her bridal robes, and attended by her friends and some of the noblest ladies of the state. Near her walked Ortrud, whom Elsa wished to honour, and who was attired in rich and costly robes. Slowly the wedding party filed across the palace courtyard to the wide open doors of the great cathedral. The maids arrayed themselves on either side to let their mistress pass; but just as Elsa reached the portal, Ortrud suddenly rushed in front of her, exclaiming, "No, you shall not enter first. I am higher born than you, and must take the lead." "What do you mean?" asked Elsa, starting back. "I mean that your nameless knight won his victory yesterday by fraud, and that I am still the rightful Duchess of Brabant." Elsa flushed red and answered her proudly, "A fitting return is that for my late kindness to you. And as to the victory, it was won fairly in sight of all the people. Stand aside, rash woman, and let me pass." Ortrud stood unmoved. "You would wed a pretty champion," she sneered. "Why, you do not know his name! And as for knowing his origin or character, forsooth! Here she snapped her fingers. "I tell you he is a magician, and won his fight with my husband by the powers of evil." "It is false!" cried Elsa wildly. "You are a slanderous—" "The King! The King!" shouted the attendants at this moment. "Make way for the King!" The quarrel at the doorway ceased as the King approached, followed by his knights. At his right hand came the Knight of the Swan, who, seeing the commotion, stepped quickly forward to Elsa's side. "What is the trouble, beloved?" he asked quietly. "This dreadful woman!" exclaimed the girl, pointing to Ortrud. "She will not let me pass, and she has been saying wicked things about you." The knight gave Ortrud one stern look before which even her vengeful spirit quailed. "Stand aside!" he commanded in a low voice. "What is wrong?" demanded the voice of the King, who had come up with the group. "Nothing now, your Majesty. We will go forward," answered the Swan Knight, taking his trembling bride upon his arm and mounting the cathedral steps. But at the threshold they met another interference. Frederick of Telramund, who had been lurking about watching all that happened, suddenly stepped from behind the door, shouting, "Stay a moment, Elsa of Brabant! You are being deceived, foolish girl! You do not know whom you are marrying. He is a sorcerer, and overcame me by magic." Elsa was like to swoon away at this unlooked-for happening, but the stranger knight whispered tenderly to her and reassured her. The King, on his part, was thoroughly aroused by this second interruption. "Begone, sirrah!" he exclaimed. "The fight was fair and the champion sent of Heaven. Come not into our presence again on peril of your life." Without farther hindrance the wedding party entered the church, and while the great organ pealed its strains of joyful music, the knight and his lady were blessed and pronounced man and wife. All that day the festivities lasted. The King had commanded that a feast be spread for every man, woman, and child in the city. The new Protector of Brabant was publicly acclaimed in the afternoon, while that evening a state banquet was held in the palace. Then, following an old custom, the maidens went ahead of the newly wedded couple to conduct them to the bridal chamber; and as they entered its door they sang a beautiful refrain that has greeted the ears of countless brides from that day to this: "Fairest and best, we lead thee on." There the maidens left them and went away singing as they had come. When the last sweet note had died away, the knight took his wife's two hands tenderly within his own. "Elsa," he murmured, "do you indeed love me, or have you wed me only from a sense of duty?" "I have loved you ever since I beheld you in my dreams," she answered. "But how came you to seek me out?" "I am indeed Heaven sent, as I told you. But without your peril, I think that love would have guided me to you. For I love you dearly, Elsa." "Ah, how sweet my name sounds upon your lips!" she cried softly. "If I could but utter your own, my happiness would be full." The knight gazed at her in silence a moment, then led her to an open casement. "Breathe all the fragrance of eventide," he said. "Do you not distinguish many sweet odours beside the dew-laden roses near you? The breeze comes soft across the meadow and sea, bringing strange memories and hints of foreign shores. Is it not all the more delightful because we cannot penetrate all these mysteries? Love itself is the greatest mystery of all. Let us love, then, and be happy in each succeeding day; for when they are past we cannot recall them. We can only remember, but the mystery is gone." "Yes, let us love and be happy," she answered doubtfully. "But, oh my husband, what shall I say when evil remarks are made, as like those by that wicked woman to day?" "Still thinking of her?" he replied, with an attempt at lightness. "She will not annoy you again. For the rest, can you not trust me?" "Can you not trust me?" she insisted. "Am I not your wife and worthy of some degree of confidence?" "Elsa, once for all, this must not be. You have given your word to respect my secret. I assure you it is not a dark secret, and that I may look you frankly and joyfully in the face as my wife. Isn't that enough?" "But Frederick and Ortrud! What do they know about you? Why did they— Oh, I cannot get their words out of my mind." Elsa was in fact growing hysterical. She clung to him wildly as they stood in the window. Poor girl! Her recent trials had left her an easy prey to the insidious attack of this day. The knight was very patient with her. He realized her unstrung condition, and tried to divert her mind by placing her gently in a chair where she could look out upon the river. "See how white the waters gleam in the moonlight," he said. "The river seems like a silver ribbon stretching away." "And look!" she cried, pointing. "There comes the swan boat to take you from me. Ah, do not go!" "Calm yourself, dear one. There is no boat." "Oh, I cannot bear this mystery. I must question you." "Elsa!" "I must, I must. What is your name?" "Alas!" he exclaimed. "Beware of what you say. Not another word, I implore you." "Whence do you come?" she continued wildly. At this moment a slight noise was heard at the door, and Frederick of Telramund burst in. He had enlisted the services of 4 of his former party, resolved to make one last bold stroke and kill the Knight of the Swan. But again he was no match for the knight. Alarmed by the noise, the latter sprang quickly for his sword and met Frederick midway in the room. A few swift strokes, and that evil man lay dead upon the floor. The 4 nobles were seized with fear, and came and knelt before the knight, craving pardon. "Bear him to the King," he said quietly, pointing to his fallen foe. "An audience will be held at early sunrise under the Oak of Justice." The men bowed humbly and went away with their burden. Elsa had well nigh fainted from the excitement, and now laid her head sobbing upon the knight's shoulder. "Forgive me!" she cried. "I recall my thoughtless words." For answer he kissed her lingeringly on the brow, and then struck a gong which summoned her attendants. "I leave the Lady Elsa in your hands," he said. "Array her as befits a bride at the rising of the sun, and conduct her to the King. There I will answer all she asks." The wondering maids hastened to Elsa's side. She held out her hands to the knight beseechingly, but he passed from the room in silence and with bowed head. The next morning early the King held court again beneath the Oak of Justice. This was the day he was to start for the wars, and many knights and soldiers had assembled to march with their leader, the new Protector of Brabant. Henry had just come, and was answering the greetings of his captains, when the 4 nobles appeared bearing the body of Frederick of Telramund upon his shield, and followed by the weeping Ortrud. In answer to the King's question as to the meaning of this, they replied that the Knight of the Swan would soon appear and explain everything. They had hardly finished speaking when Elsa and her maids came in view. Elsa was attired as yesterday in her bridal dress, but her face was woebegone, her hair dishevelled, and her eyes red with weeping. So pitiable was her appearance that the crowd near broke into exclamations of pity, while the King, rising hastily, came forward and led her to a seat. "What is the meaning of this?" he demanded. "By Heaven, I will know the truth!" "Your Majesty, the Knight of the Swan will soon appear and answer all questions," said one of the maids. The King was about to make a quick remark when the knight himself entered the throng. The men who expected to follow him into battle greeted him with cheers, but he made no response beyond a sad smile and shake of the head. He wore the same glittering armour of his first appearance, but his head was slightly bent as if in thought, and his steps were slow and reluctant. The hot-blooded King could no longer restrain himself. "I would know the meaning of these things," he said, scarcely responding to the Swan Knight's silent greeting. He pointed to the body of Frederick. "Who has done this deed?" "I slew him in self-defence," answered the knight. Then he told of the attack within his room, and took the 4 nobles to witness that he told the truth. "With your Majesty's permission I will leave the verdict to all the people," he ended. Thus appealed to, the people cried loudly that he was innocent of wrong, and that Heaven had sent him to rid the land of a usurper and a coward. "I also deem that you have done justly," said the King. But what means the sorrow of this lady whom I took under my especial protection? Answer, and carefully." "I have promised the Lady Elsa to answer her questions, and I shall likewise answer yours," replied the knight courteously. "The fighting men of Brabant, stout hearts and true, have gathered here to day expecting that I shall lead them to the wars. This cannot be. I must tell my story, and then bid farewell to all." A general murmur of dissent arose at this, but the knight stood unmoved, waiting for silence. Presently, as a hush fell, he began to speak again, slowly and earnestly. "In a far-away land," he said, "there stands a sacred hill called Mount Salvat. Upon this hill rise the walls and towers of a mystic castle, called the Temple of the Grail, for within it is preserved the most precious relic in all the world, the Holy Grail. The knights who guard this shrine are a close brotherhood who have renounced the world and given their lives to self-sacrifice and good deeds. In reward for this, the sacred cup gives them power beyond that of other men. They may journey into distant lands to help the weak and relieve distress, and always will they be victorious. But if they disclose the secret of their power, they must return to Mount Salvat. Thus was I sent to become the Lady Elsa's champion, and I had fondly hoped to dwell among you and be worthy of her love and trust. But now this cannot be. Enemies have persuaded her that my name and rank must be revealed, so it only is left for me to tell my lineage. I am not ashamed of this. I am the son of Parsifal, chief guardian of the Grail. My name is Lohengrin." As he ceased speaking, amid the profound silence, voices were heard from the river bank. "The swan! The swan! See, he comes again!" Elsa threw herself upon the ground in an agony of grief. "Oh, do not go away!" she moaned, clasping the knight's feet. "Do not go away and leave me! I shall die!" Lohengrin extended his finger sadly toward the bend in the stream, where the swan drew the boat majestically forward. "It is the summons of Heaven," he said. "I have no other choice. Farewell, beloved, forever." He raised her, and she clung wildly to him as though she could not let him go. He gently resisted her. "See," he said, "here is my sword and ring and bugle, which will bring victory in every battlefield. Keep them for your brother, of whom I give you good news. He is alive, and may return in safety one day. I had hoped to bring him back to you within the year, if I had been permitted to remain." "But you have failed, my fine hero!" cried a taunting voice, which made them all turn quickly. It was Ortrud who had come forward for one last bitter triumph. "You have failed, so you and your pretty little bride may now hear the truth. It was I who caused her to ask those troublesome questions, and it was I who made way with her precious brother. I know one or two tricks of magic myself, and one of them turned the boy into yonder swan. Ha ha ha!" She laughed harshly, and pointed to the mystic bird now at the river brink, while King and courtiers looked on in amazed silence. Lohengrin alone remained calm at her outburst. He sank upon his knees, and lifting his noble face so that the sunlight seemed to irradiate it with a glory, he prayed to Heaven earnestly and silently for aid. Suddenly, down a beam of light, a white dove fluttered. It was the dove of the Grail. Accepting this as a sign that his prayer was answered, Lohengrin unfastened the swan from the boat, when the bird vanished beneath the surface of the water, and in its stead rose a fair young knight. Lohengrin took his hand and led him forward. "This is Godfrey, the rightful Duke of Brabant," he said. "Behold your chief who will lead you to victory." Godfrey knelt in homage to the King, who raised him up and embraced him, while the people promised him their glad allegiance. Then Godfrey and Elsa rushed into each other's arms in the joy of reunion. Overcome with rage, Ortrud sank swooning across the steps of the throne. Meanwhile Lohengrin, seeing that Elsa was in the arms of her brother, entered the boat, whose chains were seized by the tiny dove. A flutter of its wings, and lo! the boat moved easily out on the stream and went swiftly forward against the current. When Elsa raised her eyes from her dear brother's face, she beheld the boat already far out upon the sunlit water. The knight stood leaning upon his shield, his whole figure shining, it seemed, with unearthly radiance, and alas, fading away like some splendid dream. With a last despairing cry of "My husband! My husband!" Elsa sank prostrate upon the shore. Her dream it had been, and it was ended. End of Story 6